Chapter 2733. The other 63 battles continued, and soon, the 64 contestants who would advance to the next round appeared. Among these results, there were also many upsets. For example, Zhang Yuan, who was ranked 17th, lost to a person named Tu Shi who had an additional qualification. There was also Chang Tian, who was ranked 31st. He also lost to an unknown person named Zhu Yan. There was also Zhu Bao, who was ranked 39th on the right. He lost to Qi Zhangjun. Every time an upset appeared, it was extremely shocking. One had to know that those who were able to enter the top 100 of the current ranking list were all experts, and there was definitely not a single mediocre one among them. A special case like Ling Han had only appeared once since ancient times. Moreover, Ling Han had also used his strength to prove that he had the right to be ranked first. But now, veteran experts were falling one by one, and newcomers were replacing them. What was going on? There were so many young experts hidden in the world. Why were they unknown in the past? The most shocking was a person named Wu Haoyang. He was actually only a 9th Firmament Immortal King. A 9th Firmament Immortal King had defeated a quasi-heavenly venerable, just like Ling Han. When Ling Han learned of this news, he could not help but be surprised. Previously, Lu Piaoxue had said that he was not a special case. There were also people who could cultivate quasi-heavenly venerable strength at the 9th Firmament Immortal King realm. As far as she knew, they were figures from hundreds of millions of years ago. However, a living example had now appeared. Chaos raged, and the entire origin world was in imminent danger. However, it also ushered in an explosion of geniuses. This Wu Haoyang seems worthy of a fight. Ling Han's lips curled into a smile. Not only did he not feel the slightest sense of urgency, but he was filled with fighting spirit. Previously, Nameless Ji had always given him endless pressure. Then there was innate talent, which was something he had to overcome. Now both of them were in the past. Although he wouldn't relax, he would definitely be more motivated if he had a formidable opponent. After a few days of rest, the second round of battles continued. There was no need to draw lots. The matchups had already been decided during the first draw. Ling Han's next opponent was Zhou Yan. Although this person had the word yen in his name, he was very slender. He did not look like a rock at all. In fact, he even appeared somewhat thin. Zhou Yan. He introduced himself. I'm currently ranked 42nd on the leaderboard. Previously, Go Yan was only ranked 89th, but this person had advanced by more than half. It could be seen that his strength was definitely much greater than Go Yan's. Ling Han. Ling Han nodded. He was not an arrogant person. Please. Zhou Yan cupped his fists as his gaze suddenly turned sharp. Ling Han also made an inviting gesture and took the initiative to attack. Bam! The two of them exchanged blows without any feints, probing each other's strength. The power of a quasi-heavenly venerable. The two of them spoke to each other in their hearts. However, Ling Han nodded his head. Zhou Yan's strength was a notch higher than Go Yan's. This was determined by his talent, and the limit of his strength that he could contain was higher. For a time, they didn't use their ultimate moves. They just clashed with their normal battle prowess. However, after exchanging over 100 moves, they both grew impatient. Drizzle Storm Fist. Zhou Yan shouted. His aura changed instantly. His left fist was weak and powerless like a drizzle in March, soft when it hit someone's body. However, his right fist was like a storm on the sea, filled with a sense of oppression. Movement and stillness were displayed at the same time in this set of fist techniques. It was incredibly strange. Ling Han immediately felt as if he was being torn apart. One side of his body seemed to want to move urgently, but the other side had to maintain stillness, which made him uncomfortable. Not only his body, but also his soul seemed like it was about to be torn into two halves. This fist technique was interesting. Ling Han channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, expelling all the discomfort he felt. Heavenly Venerable Technique against Heavenly Venerable Technique. Seeing Ling Han's body like a golden bell, enveloped by countless golden symbols, completely dispelling his attack, Zhou Yan couldn't help but pale. You actually grasped a third Heavenly Venerable Technique. Previously, The recording of the battle between Ling Han and Go Yen had long since been studied by others. Naturally, there were also people who went to ask Go Yen. The person involved would definitely be more aware of Ling Han's strength, and the conclusion they came to was that Ling Han had grasped two heavenly venerable techniques, which was why he was able to suppress Go Yen. But now, Ling Han displayed a third heavenly venerable technique. Heavens, could it be that his sect had produced 3 heavenly venerables, and so each of them had taught him a heavenly venerable technique? Zhou Yen racked his brains. It wasn't that a sect didn't have 3 heavenly venerables, but none of them seemed to have the surname Ling Ping. Countless attacks landed on Ling Han's body, but they were all blocked by the golden symbols that protected his body, turning into resplendent fragments of light. In the distance, the heavenly venerable born Fate nodded in satisfaction. This disciple's grasp of the indestructible heaven scroll was only inferior to his, but in terms of the details, he even had the potential to surpass his master. This was very normal. Not only had Ling Han discussed it with Wall and made adjustments to the indestructible heaven scroll, he had also extracted the energy of Void Child, and its quality was higher than that unique energy of the celestial realm. Thus, in the same cultivation level of the indestructible immortal gold body, Ling Han would definitely be stronger than the heavenly venerable born Fate. I wonder what the taste of this 7 kills 7 explodes fruit is like. Meanwhile, the large black dog smacked his lips. He was naturally filled with confidence that Ling Han would be able to advance into the top 3, and was already thinking about how he could steal the prize from Ling Han's hands. Meanwhile, the Empress and the Rain Emperor were watching from the sidelines, similarly hoping that Ling Han could win as soon as possible. In the battle, Zhou Yen displayed his full strength. He wanted to blast apart Ling Han's defenses in a single blow, and defeat Ling Han with an even stronger battle prowess. Otherwise, when he was no longer able to channel his heavenly venerable technique, he could only hide here and there when faced with Ling Han's counterattack. He was confident in himself because his power was stronger. However, the strength of Ling Han's defenses caused him to despair. Though he tore apart the golden seals with his punches, as soon as one seal was extinguished, a new one would immediately form, causing the golden bell around him to remain unmoving. After about half a day, even Zhou Yen had no more strength to channel his heavenly venerable technique, and his battle prowess instantly dropped. Ling Han broke into a grin. "Do you still want to fight?" He only defended and did not attack, and had already used up Zhou Yan's greatest trump card, and he still had 2 heavenly venerable techniques that he had not used, so what could his opponent use to block him? "Of course we have to fight," Zhou Yan said. Ling Han could exhaust one of his powerful moves, and he believed that he could do the same. And his power was stronger, and he could suppress his opponent in terms of normal battle prowess. "All right." Ling Han charged out, his fists swinging continuously. He did not continuously channel the 5-element lightning technique or the 9 transformations heaven scroll, but would use them from time to time. The 5-element lightning technique was still fine, as there would be obvious characteristics after it was channeled, but the 9 transformations heaven scroll had no warning signs, so Zhou Yen was really unable to guard against it. If you went to block it, then you would receive a heavy blow, but what if you managed to dodge it? However, Ling Han was actually only throwing out a very ordinary punch, and his expression was not good either. Zhou Yen kept on jumping here and there, completely not daring to receive even a single move from Ling Han. Thus, after defending for a very long time, he could not help but launch a counterattack. Ling Han's punch met the attack, and a terrifying power surged, instantly sending Zhou Yen flying. Chapter 2734. I've been tricked. A thought flashed through Zhou Yan's mind, and he saw Ling Han erupt with power. He had already caught up to him, and a series of furious attacks followed. After this series of attacks, Zhou Yan finally couldn't hold on any longer, and he collapsed to the ground, unable to get up again. Ling Han easily obtained his second victory. In the other rounds, the newcomers continued to play the role of dark horses, and they won easily as well. The most astonishing was still Wu Haoyang. His opponent was a powerhouse ranked 6th on the current ranking list, just a little bit away from becoming a true Empyrean. Yet he was still being suppressed by Wu Haoyang. He couldn't even return a single move and could only admit defeat. And in these two battles, Wu Haoyang had used a total of 3 heavenly venerable techniques, no weaker than Ling Han. This shocked everyone. 3 heavenly venerable techniques. If he used them one by one, who could block them? Quasi-heavenly venerable was ultimately just a quasi-heavenly venerable, not a true heavenly venerable. Come, Ling Han and Wu Haoyang should both be able to obtain a 7 kills 7 violence pill, provided that they didn't meet before the semifinals. In that case, one of them would definitely be eliminated. Why were the current 9th Heaven Celestial Kings so terrifying? After the second round, there were only 32 contestants left who could continue. A few days later, the third round began, and Ling Han also welcomed his third opponent. Yubara Takashi, the opponent said. He had a head of yellow hair, and his eyes were like those of a snake, flashing with green and yellow light. His skin was also covered with snake-like scales, and he had a pair of wings on his back, as well as a long tail. Ranked 7th on the current rankings. The elites in the top 10 could be called big shots. In fact, Yubara Takashi was indeed a big shot here. It was said that his overall score was already close to being on the overall rankings, and the time he had fought in the first level far exceeded that of anyone else. The reason why he hadn't broken through to become a heavenly venerable was that he wanted to leave his name on the overall rankings. After all, the current rankings would be updated every 1,000 years, and they would only last for 1,000,000 years at most. How could they compare to the overall rankings? Ling Han nodded. Ling Han, please advise me. Yubara Takashi didn't waste any words, and immediately attacked. Hong, his wings flapped, stirring up a powerful hurricane. Sand flew into the air, becoming a blur. Ling Han was slightly surprised because the sand couldn't block the vision of a quasi-Empyrean, but he could only catch a blurry figure of Yubaron. This was naturally abnormal. What methods did they use? Shio. Just at this moment, a gust of wind blew over. Yubara Takashi had already flapped his wings and was charging over. There was even a spear in his hand, and he stabbed it towards Ling Han. Ling Han met the attack head-on. His fist punched out, but it directly passed through Yubara Takashi's body. It didn't hit him at all. He used all of his strength in this fist, yet he only struck empty air, immediately making him feel extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, he had an immortal gold body, or else this fist might have even dislocated him. Hallucination. Ling Han narrowed his eyes. Interesting. He caught sight of the silhouette in the sand. Shio, this silhouette suddenly enlarged and attacked him. Yubara Takashi reappeared. This time, he held a sword in his hand and stabbed at Ling Han. Ling Han clenched his fist and punched out. However, it was just an afterimage again. Fortunately, Ling Han was prepared this time, and he managed to deflect the force in time, so he didn't feel too uncomfortable. However, this illusion technique was quite awesome. This was because Ling Han couldn't tell whether the person attacking him was real or fake. If he didn't defend himself, then if it was the real person attacking him, he would be bombarded by a powerful move of a quasi-Empyrean. That wouldn't be a joke. Even immortal gold would be reduced to dust in front of the destructive power of a heavenly venerable. Yubara Takashi kept appearing and attacking, and Ling Han also kept meeting his attacks, treating every attack as if it were real. This would consume some of Ling Han's strength, but he had a lot of stamina now, so this was a small matter. He just had to pay attention to deflect the force and not let himself be injured. He continuously punched out more than 100 times, but all of them hit empty air. Shio. Yubara Takashi swung his saber as usual. Ling Han met it head-on, but he still hit empty air. This wasn't strange at all. However, another figure suddenly appeared. It was still Yubara Takashi. At this time, Ling Han was in the midst of deflecting the force. His figure was twisted, and this was the moment when his defense was at its weakest. Break! Yubara Takashi attacked. The martial art in his hand was a sharp saber, and he stabbed at Ling Han's ribs. This was an immortal artifact, and there were countless runes flashing on it. The real person had finally attacked. Ling Han had already expected this. This kind of battle technique would definitely be mixed between real and fake. Yuburu Takashi wanted to throw him into confusion and expose an opening. Circles of golden runes immediately appeared on his body, wrapping him up. The sharp saber stabbed into the golden runes, but it only produced countless splashes of light. It couldn't pierce through Ling Han's defense at all. Yuburu Takashi's attack missed, and he immediately retreated. He was about to escape and wait for an opportunity to attack again. "Get over here." Ling Han reached out, grabbing at Yuburu Takashi's wrist. This grab was incomparably fast. Yuburu Takashi had always been looking for an opportunity, but wasn't Ling Han the same? Yuburu Takashi attacked Ling Han with a backhand. Naturally, he wasn't willing to give up his hand. The two of them moved their fingers rapidly, pointing, pressing, pushing, and slapping. They were playing an intense game in a small area. Ling Han only wanted to entangle his opponent. With a long roar, he charged forward. The two of them continuously attacked each other. At this time, Ling Han's advantage was fully displayed. This was because he had an immortal gold body. If he was punched, kicked, or even hit by an immortal artifact, he wouldn't be affected much. However, Yuburu Takashi was different. If he was hit by a punch, his skin would definitely be broken and his bones would be broken. In this kind of close combat, they didn't even have the opportunity to use their Heavenly Paragon treasure techniques. Even if it only took half a heartbeat, their battle was too intense. How could they have that kind of time? Who knew how many times they would be hit if they wasted that bit of time? Of course, Ling Han could do that. It didn't matter if he was hit a few times. His body was like immortal gold. As long as he wasn't hit by the battle prowess of a Heavenly Paragon, he would be fine. His chest was punched 17 times in a row. His face instantly turned scarlet, and his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. "I admit defeat," he said. Ling Han stopped. He saw Yuburu Takashi retreat hundreds of kilometers, coughing repeatedly. His chest was dyed red with blood. Yuburu Takashi looked deeply at Ling Han, then turned and left. A quasi-heavenly paragon had lost to a ninth heaven celestial king. Even if he had 1,000 reasons or 10,000 reasons, could he say them? On the other battlefields, the Dark Horses continued their undefeated legend. No one had tasted defeat yet. However, after the top 16 were decided, the rules of the competition suddenly changed. Originally, after entering the top 8 and top 4, the champion, second, and third place would be decided. The 3 7 kills 7 violence pills would naturally have an owner. Now, one person would be eliminated every day. When there were only 3 people left, the competition would end. There would be no champion, second, or third place, only the top 3. The rules were very simple. 16 people would fight for 15 spots. After one day, those who didn't get a spot would be eliminated. Then, 15 people would fight for 14 spots, and so on. Ling Han was somewhat interested. Under such rules, there might be situations where 2 against 1, 5 against 1, or even 15 against 1. Most people would join forces to eliminate someone. The competition would be in 3 days. Chapter 2735. How long could 3 days be? The main thing was that there wasn't much time to waste here. If it dragged on for too long, it wouldn't be fun if the frenzied army attacked. Ling Han rested for a while and then went to the competition venue. Because the rules were different this time, it wouldn't be held outside the city walls. Instead, an Empyrean would take out an Empyrean treasure and enter the treasure's internal space to fight. An Empyrean treasure could certainly withstand the crazy bombardment of a quasi-Empyrean. In terms of toughness, only a 6-step Empyrean could truly destroy an Empyrean treasure. All 16 people arrived. If Ling Han was included, then there were as many as 6 newcomers. The other 10 were powerhouses on the current ranking list, ranked in the top 20. But after the previous battles, everyone didn't treat them well, thinking that this was the world of the newcomers. Do you think that the sudden change in the competition rules is to curb the momentum of the newcomers? Many people came to watch the competition. They whispered to each other, discussing the sudden change in the rules. It's very possible. If it's a one-on-one, the top 3 spots might be taken by the newcomers. If the rules are changed, the newcomers might be driven away by the old-timers. First, the newcomers aren't familiar with each other, so it's difficult for them to join forces. Second, even if the newcomers are willing to join forces, they will be at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. So, it's possible that the newcomers will be completely wiped out a few days ago. Just as everyone was talking, an Empyrean appeared and said in a deep voice, "All 16 contestants, go in." Ling Han and the other 16 people entered the Empyrean treasure one by one. This wasn't unfamiliar to most people. There was definitely an Empyrean powerhouse backing them, so they must have come into contact with the Empyrean treasure before. This was a space of nothingness, like the depths of the Sea of Stars. There was nothing there, but now there were 15 chairs, and each chair was far from each other. In addition, there was a huge hourglass, but it hadn't started flowing yet. Clearly, once the hourglass moved, the battle would begin. When the hourglass flowed out, it would be the end of the day. Those who didn't get a spot could only quietly withdraw from the competition. While the 16 people were still there, the hourglass moved. The game has begun. As expected, the 10 elders stood together and glanced at the 6 newcomers. Obviously, after knowing the rules of the competition, they had discussed it with each other and reached a consensus to chase the newcomer out first. No one had informed Ling Han, so he was naturally excluded from the group. "Are you going to leave on your own, or do you want us to join forces to chase you out?" asked one of the elders. "You're just a bunch of chickens and dogs. Do you think you're fit to be so impudent in front of me?" Wu Haoyang stood out, his arrogance soaring. "I alone can take care of all of you. How dare you?" "Impudent!" The old men all shouted. All of them had great backgrounds. They were either 3rd step Heavenly Venerables or 4th step Heavenly Venerables. How am I supposed to wipe you all out? You're just a bunch of trash." Wu Haoyang took the initiative to attack. Wang, his entire body shone, and his entire being seemed illusory. Xiao, he attacked the elders, and countless rays of light shot out. This fellow was really crazy, really starting a battle against 10 quasi-Empyreans alone. It had to be known that these 10 people were all powerhouses on the current rankings. Which one of them wasn't a genius among geniuses? But Wu Haoyang didn't care about that, and he happily killed his way over, challenging the 10 powerhouses alone. How arrogant! The 10 powerhouses roared angrily, and they all attacked Wu Haoyang. This was the interior of an Empyrean treasure. Every movement inside would be recorded by the Empyrean treasure and replayed outside. Thus, the spectators couldn't help but feel that Wu Haoyang's actions were akin to suicide. This fellow is crazy. That's 10 quasi-Empyreans, and all of them are super powerhouses who might break through at any moment. One of them isn't easy to deal with, and he'll definitely lose if he fights 2 at the same time, let alone 10 of them. 6 against 10? Perhaps there's a sliver of hope. This fellow is just sending himself to his death by leaving the team. Everyone shook their heads. This young man's talent was indeed monstrous. He had the strength to fight a quasi-Empyrean at the 9th level of the Celestial King realm, but it was also because of this that he was too arrogant. He actually dared to act so recklessly. Arrogant people were destined to suffer. Ling Han's eyes narrowed slightly. Did Wu Haoyang have a physique like him? Otherwise, how could he dare to fight 10 of them alone? The results were quickly revealed. Wu Haoyang didn't have an extremely strong physique, but he had transformed into a beam of light that was truly untouchable. The attacks of the 10 quasi-Empyreans couldn't even touch him, so how could they injure him? But Wu Haoyang's attacks were extremely domineering. As he punched with both hands, dazzling beams of light shot out. They could even penetrate one's sea of consciousness and attack one's divine soul. This was extremely terrifying, and the 10 powerhouses all grunted in pain. They were caught off guard and suffered a small loss. Just this one attack was enough for Wu Haoyang to be proud. A 9th-level Celestial King had the upper hand against 10 peak quasi-Empyreans. It was simply an eternity wonder. Too powerful. Why haven't I heard of such a powerful person before? Will he create a miracle? Everyone cried out in alarm. Even Ling Han was a little surprised by Wu Haoyang's strength. Wu Haoyang didn't let them off easily. He kept attacking, constantly blasting out beams of light. This terrifying destructive power made the 10 quasi-Empyreans tired of defending and unable to form an effective joint attack. From this point alone, Wu Haoyang was truly powerful. He was able to suppress the 10 quasi-Empyreans by himself and force them to fight separately. They had no choice but to temporarily retreat and leave Wu Haoyang's attack range. Then, after a brief pause, they circulated their Empyrean Paragon skills to counterattack. The power of an ant. Wu Haoyang laughed wildly, still fearless as he brazenly met them head-on. His body was extremely strange. Even when the 10 quasi-Empyreans circulated their Empyrean Paragon skills, they still couldn't touch him. They could only be bombarded by him. This not only shocked and puzzled the 10 quasi-Empyreans, but also made the spectators hold their heads and cry out in disbelief. Even Ling Han and the other 4 newcomers couldn't help but frown because they would eventually have to face Wu Haoyang. If it were him, how would he deal with it? Ling Han also asked himself how Wu Haoyang could be so strong. First, he must have tempered his body with one of the Origin World's 6 essential powers. That was why he had the combat power of a quasi-Empyrean when he was a 9th-level immortal king. Second, the cultivation technique he circulated was very special. It allowed him to ignore even Empyrean Paragon skills. Ling Han closed his eyes and carefully comprehended. After a while, he had a guess. Wu Haoyang might be able to use virtual energy or similar powers. This was a unique power that surpassed the fiery frost plane. It was precisely this power that rendered the 10 quasi-Empyreans powerless. As for why Wu Haoyang could use a power that only Empyreans could use, only he knew. Chapter 2737. A Beautiful Romance. Wu Haoyang was incomparably domineering. In his eyes, whether it was the top 10 experts from yesterday or the newcomers today, they were all qualified to be swept away by him. He opened his arms, and one hand transformed into countless vines that stretched towards Ling Han, Tu Shi, Tai Binghe, and Zhu Yan. His other hand transformed into a fire dragon that pressed towards Qi Zhongjun. The vines instantly grew, transforming into a forest that seemed to isolate Ling Han's group of 4, allowing Wu Haoyang and Qi Zhongjun to determine the victor first. Qi Zhongjun roared and met the attack fearlessly. Bang! The fire dragon slammed into his body, and flames swirled around. But in an instant, Qi Zhongjun charged out of the flames. His clothes were all burned red, but his exposed skin was unscathed. It was very shocking. His clothes were woven from immortal gold, and now the immortal gold was burned red, but his skin was not affected at all. His defense was too strong. You're not the only one with an invincible defense. Qi Zhongjun laughed loudly. He clasped his arms together and fiercely hammered towards Wu Haoyang. You call this invincible? Wu Haoyang sneered. He raised his right hand, and bang, he blocked Qi Zhongjun's hands. How do I tear it apart? On the other side, the forest of vines had already been destroyed. The young geniuses stood proudly, all of them emitting an overwhelming battle intent. But they did not attack. Instead, they stood with their hands clasped behind their backs, quietly watching the battle between Qi Zhongjun and Wu Haoyang. They were all too proud and disdained to join hands with others. I've underestimated you, but there's no difference. Wu Haoyang laughed loudly and once again attacked Qi Zhongjun. Qi Zhongjun was equally domineering, and he swung his fists to meet the attack. The two clashed. In terms of power, Qi Zhongjun still had a slight advantage, but it was not enough to completely suppress his opponent. You're only a so-so, Qi Zhongjun sneered. Is that so? Wu Haoyang revealed an evil smile. His entire body suddenly lit up, and then he turned into a beam of light. It's happening again. Everyone was shocked. Yesterday, after Wu Haoyang turned into a ray of light, he was invincible and invincible. Now, he had entered such a state again. Did Qi Zhongjun have a way to break it? Boom, Qi Zhongjun swung his fists, but they passed through Wu Haoyang's body, not causing any damage at all. As expected, even Qi Zhongjun couldn't do anything. Hee. Wu Haoyang sneered and stretched out his right hand to grab Qi Zhongjun's head. This move was very humiliating, and it was obvious that he was superior to Qi Zhongjun. Qi Zhongjun snorted and quickly retreated. Of course, he had considered what would happen if his attack was ineffective and he suffered a counterattack from Wu Haoyang. Therefore, Wu Haoyang's attack was not beyond his expectations. Wu Haoyang's attack missed, but he didn't take it to heart. With a tap of his foot, he pounced forward again and chased after Qi Zhongjun. The two of them fought again, but this was no longer a battle. Qi Zhongjun couldn't hit Wu Haoyang no matter what. No matter how heaven-defying Wu Haoyang's battle prowess was, he couldn't use it at all. Therefore, this was a one-sided pursuit. Wu Haoyang chased, and Qi Zhongjun fled. It couldn't be said that Qi Zhongjun's strength was inferior to Wu Haoyang's, but Wu Haoyang's current strength was invincible. He was completely undefeatable, and Qi Zhongjun could only continue to flee. Could it be that there was no way to deal with Wu Haoyang? His battle prowess was indeed very strong, and he had grasped at least 3 Empyrean Paragon techniques. However, everyone here believed that they were not weaker than him. But how could they injure Wu Haoyang? This had become the biggest problem. Back then, when Wu Haoyang first entered the number 1 martial institution, he was already able to make a 9th heaven celestial king feel helpless against him. This was because his body was like immortal gold. But now, Wu Haoyang had advanced one step further, and he couldn't even touch him. It should be known that innate could still be suppressed and trapped, but against Wu Haoyang he really couldn't do anything at all. "Let me!" Tu Shi lightly shouted and charged at Wu Haoyang. He was like a ferocious tiger, and his entire body was wrapped in black light. It was as pure as when heaven and earth were first formed, and he emanated the aura of the primordial era. "It's the same even if I defeat you first." Wu Haoyang turned around and attacked Tu Shi. Bang! Tu Shi's attack swept past, but it directly passed through Wu Haoyang's body, and similarly couldn't injure him. "You overestimate yourself." Wu Haoyang sneered and slapped at Tu Shi. Tu Shi hurriedly retreated, but it was still too late. He was swept by Wu Haoyang's attack, and immediately a wound was left on his abdomen. Blood gushed out. Fortunately, he had retreated in time, and the injury was not too serious. Who else? Wu Haoyang clasped his hands behind his back. He realized that although these 5 people couldn't do anything to him today, they were much stronger than the 10 people from yesterday. They wouldn't be so easy to deal with. Of course, he still stood in an invincible position. "Let me experience it." Zhu Yan walked out. Her figure was slender and alluring, and she was as cold as ice, but also as beautiful as a peach. Wu Haoyang was stunned for a moment, but he immediately retracted it. In his heart, beauties were just to spice up his life, and martial art was irreplaceable. Zhu Yan attacked. She used a big move, and her hand slashed out like a divine phoenix swinging its tail. The entire starry sky was filled with dazzling light, but it was still useless. Wu Haoyang just stood there, like the Lord of Heaven and Earth, and all attacks were useless against him. Tai Binghe also punched out, and an ice bear appeared. Hong, the ice bear passed through Wu Haoyang's body, and was not injured at all. Everyone was speechless. Was there really an invincible defense in this world? "Do you still want to try?" Wu Haoyang pointed at Ling Han. He knew that this was the current number 1 person on the rankings, and at the same time, he was also considered a newcomer. But so what if he was number 1? In his eyes, he was just trash. Naturally. Ling Han punched out. Hong, the energy turned into a ray of light, and shot towards Wu Haoyang. Poof. This ray of light still passed through Wu Haoyang's body, but everyone was surprised, because the ray of light that Wu Haoyang had transformed into actually swayed a little. "There's a chance." Ling Han let out a long roar and attacked Wu Haoyang. He punched out, and this time, Wu Haoyang actually reacted and also punched back. Ping! Under everyone's incredulous gazes, Ling Han's fist and Wu Haoyang's fist collided. They touched. Tu Shi and the others were overjoyed. Although it was not done by them, it proved that Wu Haoyang was not absolutely invincible. Ling Han came to a realization. So, using the intrinsic power of the origin world to temper my body can hit you. Previously, he had only struck out with a gust of wind, so it only had a slight effect on Wu Haoyang. But this time, he used his fist, so the effect was completely different. Wu Haoyang also had a slightly surprised expression on his face. It was actually very simple to break his cultivation technique. One just needed to use the intrinsic power of the origin world to attack. But what did this mean? Even a first-step heavenly venerable could not injure him. This was because this was an ability that the Wu family's 7-step heavenly venerable had paid a considerable price to personally use on him. But here, a 9th-step immortal king had actually managed to hit his body. Chapter 2738. The competition will continue tomorrow, said that Empyrean. Everyone looked at Wu Haoyang, who was lying on the ground. Fortunately, this guy was knocked unconscious. Otherwise, he would definitely be screaming now. Everyone dispersed. Ling Han and the others needed to adjust themselves for the next day's battle. When he returned to his own abode, the Rain Emperor and the others all came over. Well done, you've eliminated that Wu fellow. The large black dog was extremely excited and said, that guy is far too arrogant. Who would have thought that our little Han isn't weak as well? He was actually able to wound his body. Indeed, everything has its vanquisher. The heavenly lord of life-giving smiled and nodded. If it weren't for Ling Han, then Wu Haoyang would definitely be invincible. However, Ling Han could restrain him. On the other hand, although Ling Han's physique was like immortal gold, he wasn't invincible in the face of an Empyrean-level powerhouse. As long as Tu Shi and the others joined forces, there was a high chance that Ling Han wouldn't be able to defeat them. He believed that Wu Haoyang would be very depressed. Why did the heavens let a Ling Han appear in front of him? This time, little Han should be able to secure victory. The large black dog said with a smile. Then he urged, little Han, why don't you learn from Wu Haoyang and send the remaining 4 people flying tomorrow? That way, you'll be able to obtain the 7 kills, 7 violence pill alone. The original born heavenly lord immediately shook his head. Ling Han isn't Wu Haoyang. It's just that his body is like immortal gold, but he isn't invincible. If he were to reveal such thoughts, he would definitely be targeted. Under the alliance of 4 great experts, the chances of him being defeated are very high. Tu Shi, Qi Zhongjun, Zhu Yan, and Tai Binghe were all geniuses who could lead an era. Ling Han was not afraid of them one-on-one, but it would be difficult for him to fight against 2 of them. If it was 1 against 3, he would not be able to fight back. The large black dog couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. He had always been a very greedy person. The day passed quickly, and the competition continued. Ling Han did not see Wu Haoyang. He did not know if this guy had not woken up yet, or if he felt embarrassed and was too ashamed to come out. He didn't care. Right now, his goal was to obtain the 7 kills, 7 violence pill. After entering the Empyrean treasure, the competition quickly continued. 5 people fighting for 4 spots. After a brief confrontation, a chaotic battle immediately broke out. Ling Han wasn't targeted because he didn't have an invincible physique like Wu Haoyang. Furthermore, he wasn't as overbearing as Wu Haoyang. Thus, Tu Shi and the other 3 followed the rules. After a day of chaotic battles, Tu Shi became the 2nd rookie to be eliminated. His complexion was very bad. In fact, it could not be said that his strength was inferior. It was just that he had been sent flying at that moment. By the time he ran back, the hourglass had already flowed out. Just like Wu Haoyang the day before yesterday, it was not a matter of strength, but more of luck. Now, there were only 4 people left. As long as 1 more was eliminated, the competition would be over. Who could it be? After a day of rest, the competition continued on the last day. After the 4 experts confronted each other for a while, they divided into 2 groups. Ling Han fought against Qi Zhongjun, while Zhu Yan fought against Tai Binghe. As long as one of them was defeated, the remaining 3 would be able to stand out. But with their strength, using the Empyrean treasure for a day was not a problem. In such a state, they were almost invincible, and no one could suppress the other. Thus, even though the day was about to end, the 4 people were still fighting fiercely. There were only a dozen grains of sand left in the hourglass. The 4 people no longer sought to defeat each other. Instead, they set their target on the chairs and attacked non-stop. 9 grains. Peng, peng, peng. The 4 people attacked each other. It was no longer a fight between two people, but a chaotic battle. Whoever was slightly weaker would be sent flying and naturally eliminated. Since they had already reached this stage, who wanted to fall at the last moment? The four people used their ultimate moves. They didn't care who it was as long as one of them was sent flying. 7 grains, 5 grains, 3 grains. When there was only 1 grain of sand left, they all roared and attacked with all their strength. Ping, a terrifying shockwave surged, and a figure was finally sent flying. The remaining 3 people immediately scrambled for a position. The last grain of sand fell, and the competition was over. Light flashed and someone was kicked out. It was Taibinghe. In other words, the final victors were Ling Han, Zhu Yan, and Qi Zhongjun. Shua, shua, shua. The 3 people also came out of the Empyrean treasure. Very good, very good. The Empyrean smiled and nodded. Congratulations on killing your way out. This is your reward. I hope you can kill more of the Frenzy Army. He took out a pill bottle and handed it to Ling Han. Ling Han took it and said, "Thank you, Lord." The Empyrean smiled and agreed. He didn't dare to be arrogant in front of Ling Han. It wouldn't be long before Ling Han caught up to him in terms of battle prowess, and then in terms of cultivation level. Perhaps in another billion years, it would be his turn to call Ling Han Lord instead. Thus, now was the time to form a good relationship. As to why the reward was given to Ling Han first, there were considerations. The second to receive the reward was Zhu Yan. We will never forget the sacrifice that Senior Zhu has made for the Yuan world, the Empyrean said in a low voice. Zhu Yan's expression was solemn as she received the pill bottle. I definitely won't let my ancestor be humiliated. The third was naturally Qi Zhongjun. The Empyrean reached out his hand and handed over the pill bottle. Swoosh! Right at this time, a streak of light suddenly streaked over, its speed astonishingly fast. Who could have thought that someone would actually sneak attack at this time? It was still that Empyrean who reacted the fastest, reaching out his hand and slapping towards that streak of light. But when his palm slapped the light, that streak of light continued to fly over without being affected. Wu Haoyang. Seeing this scene, everyone uttered a name in their hearts. Sure enough, the light figure transformed into Wu Haoyang's appearance. He reached out his hand and grabbed towards the pill bottle in that Empyrean's hand. Hiss! This guy actually wanted to snatch the 7 kills, 7 violence pill forcefully. Everyone was shocked until their scalps went numb. This guy was also too audacious, right? He actually dared to snatch something from the hands of an Empyrean. Moreover, this was the Outer Realm battlefield. Those who did not abide by the rules could be beheaded immediately. But this was too unexpected, and no one was prepared for it. After Wu Haoyang flashed past that Empyrean, he had already succeeded 90% of the time. His hand grabbed again, and the last pill bottle landed in his hand. But he was still not satisfied, and he grabbed towards Zhu Yan, wanting to snatch another pill. Ling Han attacked, punching out. Wait until I break through to become a quasi-Empyrean, then I'll come and fight you. Wu Haoyang shouted. He did not want to continue fighting, and he turned to leave. Don't run. That Empyrean was enraged. He picked up his ancient mirror and chased after Wu Haoyang. If he really let Wu Haoyang escape, he would lose all his face. My pill! Qi Zhongjun was also enraged, and he chased after him. It was just that Wu Haoyang's speed was clearly faster than theirs, or rather, his physique was too monstrous. As long as he was careful and didn't get hit by an Empyrean treasure, he would be invincible here, apart from Ling Han. After a while, that Empyrean and Qi Zhongjun returned, their faces ashen. This matter would not end so easily. Wu Haoyang's actions were too outrageous. That Empyrean immediately reported to his superiors, requesting for the Wu family's cooperation to capture Wu Haoyang and bring him over to uphold the rules. Chapter 2740. The Wu clan's response was quick, but it wasn't directed at Wu Haoyang. Instead, they sent over a divine sense from their ancestor, Wu Jihong. Hee, this little guy really knows how to cause trouble. It was just a simple sentence. This was a 7-step heavenly venerable's attitude towards this matter. Since it was causing trouble, what was there to pursue? who dared to take the risk of offending a seventh-step heavenly venerable and forcefully capture Wu Haoyang. Rules were meant to be broken, and a seventh-step heavenly venerable had the right to break rules. As long as other seventh-step heavenly venerables didn't say anything, they were the heavens, the earth, the law, and the reason. This matter was left unsettled. After Ling Han received it, he was first surprised. No wonder Wu Haoyang dared to be so arrogant. First, he indeed had the ability, and second, he had the support of his clan. Even after causing such a big trouble, he could still act as if nothing had happened. This really broadened his horizons. He only thought this and then didn't dwell on this matter anymore. In any case, in the battle with Wu Haoyang, he had the upper hand, and if someone hated someone, it should be Wu Haoyang who hated him. Increasing his strength was the most important thing. Ling Han immediately went into seclusion. He wanted to refine the 7 kills 7 violence pill. Otherwise, if Wu Haoyang broke through and he didn't, with Wu Haoyang's personality, he would definitely defeat him in public and trample on him. He took the 7 kill 7 violence pill and began to refine its medicinal power. When he first took the pill, there was no reaction, but when the medicinal power spread and circulated in his body, Ling Han felt that something was wrong. The medicinal power was extremely terrifying, like a sharp knife cutting at his body and soul, wanting to tear him apart. 7 kill 7 violence pill meant that one had to experience 7 killing tribulations and 7 times of mental berserk. Only after enduring all of them could one obtain a great improvement. Chunks of flesh fell off from Ling Han's body. He had an immortal gold body, but right now, it was completely useless, falling apart in disorder. Soon after, he became a blood person and skeleton. However, his skeleton was even more sturdy and wasn't destroyed by the medicinal power. There was light wrapped around it, and his heart was still in his skeleton, beating vigorously. He activated the indestructible heaven scroll, and golden seals appeared, transforming into his flesh and blood. After 3 whole days, he finally made it through. Immediately, his cultivation began to soar. A sense of invincibility welled up in him. He wanted nothing more than to defeat all the experts in the world and stand alone. He wants to fight. Ling Han was shocked. He had made it through a killing tribulation, but he had become berserk. This was another tribulation. He hurriedly guarded his heart, using great willpower to suppress this kind of violence. Another 3 days passed and he made it through. However, the medicinal power became violent again. His flesh and blood fell off his body again, and his knowledge felt like it was about to be torn apart. He felt so uncomfortable that he wanted to howl. This time, it was even more difficult to endure. Fortunately, Ling Han had experienced countless hardships before. Although this was very uncomfortable, it was not enough to break his limit. 3 days later, the medicinal power became docile, and Ling Han ushered in another wave of crazy growth in his cultivation. But soon after, he became violent again. After this continuous cycle for 5 times, even Ling Han's mental state could not take it anymore. The 6th wave of violent medicinal power came again. This time, cracks appeared in his bones. It was extremely terrifying. He finally made it through with great difficulty. His cultivation level soared, directly rushing to the peak stage of the 9th heaven. It had been said long ago that he was in reality a pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. However, others started from 1, while he started from 0.1. And at this time, he did not need any steps at all, and naturally became a pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Heaven and earth instantly sensed that a heavenly tribulation was coming. Ling Han was not afraid of the heavenly tribulation. He now had a divine metal body, and even if he was sitting or lying down, he could face the heavenly tribulation. But the key was that this was not the right time. Under the effect of the medicinal power, Ling Han became violent again, and when the heavenly tribulation descended and bombarded him, it also made his heart that he had calmed down with great difficulty become wild and restless. A feeling of brutality rose up in him, and he wanted to slaughter the world. Scatter! He bombarded the heavenly tribulation forcefully, his black hair standing on end, his eyes crimson red, as if he had gone mad. Want to control me? Impossible! Ling Han roared, veins throbbing on his forehead, but his eyes were recovering clarity. He had fought countless battles in his life, and his willpower was like iron and steel, so how could he fall here? 3 days later, Ling Han finally made it through. But the final attack, the violent attack, came again. Ling Han's bones instantly shattered one by one. He channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, forcibly joining his bones back together, but the medicinal power swept over, and his bones shattered again. He continuously repeated this process, and really almost died. Then, his mind went berserk again. After another 3 days, Ling Han's face recovered its calm, and his eyes opened, completely clear. He finally made it through. Ling Han breathed out in relief and thought, if he was given another 7 kills 7 violence pill now, would he still eat it? He wasn't sure, but because of his desire for power he would choose to eat it, but when he thought of the pain he had experienced in the past month, he had a kind of fear that he would never touch this kind of pill again. What's the point of thinking about such a boring thing? There's no second 7 kills 7 violence pill. Ling Han shook his head. He looked inside his body, and saw that after the celestial seed had gone through 9 transformations, it had turned into a small person that looked very similar to him, sitting in his mind in a cross-legged position, an aura of primal chaos circulating around its body, its appearance solemn. He tried to communicate with Suzy again. The celestial seed's small person communicated with heaven and earth, and didn't need him to use the heavenly venerable mark. Suzy could reach out and enter his body, circulating, and improving his body arts. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder one had to reach the peak stage of the 9th heaven to be qualified to break through to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. After the celestial seed had gone through 9 transformations, it would be much easier to communicate with the intrinsic power of the origin world. Of course, Ling Han had already communicated with Suzy and completed this process in advance, so he only needed to reach out. If it was another peak stage 9th heaven celestial king, they might never be able to sense the unique power of the plane, let alone the intrinsic power of the origin world. Just like Ling Han, he could clearly sense Suzy, but he couldn't sense the unique power of the fire frost plane, nor could he sense the other 5 intrinsic powers. Every power is exclusive, and it prevents me from sensing the other powers. So, the higher the realm, the harder it is to improve. Ling Han came to a realization. The heavenly venerable mark appeared in his mind once more, and the speed at which he extracted Suzy instantly increased. Now, he was finally a true pseudo-heavenly venerable, so he didn't need to be careful when extracting Suzy. Now that his realm was there, success would follow naturally. Unfortunately, my combat strength hasn't undergone any earth-shattering changes. Ling Han shook his head. Breaking through to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier had only opened up the upper limit for him to continue improving his body arts. Just like other 9th heaven celestial kings breaking through to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, they could only start cultivating their body arts, but it would take a long time for their combat strength to truly soar. His current improvement mainly came from the 7 kills 7 violence pill. As for his body, it still needed time to accumulate. However, I should be able to fight an Empyrean now. Ling Han smiled, because he could now circulate the Empyrean Paragon skill without limit. There was no longer a time limit. Ling Han, get your ass out here and fight. Wu Haoyang's voice rang out once more from outside. Chapter 2742. A Beautiful Romance. Putting aside the fact that Ling Han had reached the top of the current ranking list for the first time, either one of these 2 people could be considered a miracle. They had killed 1 or 2,000 quasi-Empyreans in a single battle. Who could believe this? But who told these 2 people to be incomparably extraordinary? They had directly grasped the intrinsic power of the origin world. This was a crushing advantage for quasi-Empyreans. In addition, one had an extremely strong defensive power and the other was untouchable. They were both monsters that couldn't be killed, allowing them to achieve such a feat perhaps even after several hundred epochs passed. No one would be able to break their record. Why hadn't Lin Yolian and Xen Chihu been so fierce back then? The reason was simple. They hadn't killed their way out when the army attacked the city, So how could the number of enemies they killed compare to Ling Han and Wu Haoyang? Ling Han and Wu Haoyang were still fighting. The two of them were truly enraged, determined to determine who was superior and who was inferior. In the end, everyone got used to it. Many people even became impatient and couldn't be bothered to pay attention to it anymore. After all, their own cultivation was the most important thing. What was the use of being noisy? However, there were still many people watching. Two great geniuses fighting each other would definitely be able to gain some insights. This battle was truly endless. They both had competitive personalities, especially the stronger their opponent, the more they wanted to win. 10 years, 100 years. Time passed just like that. During this period of time, the frenzied army launched a few more attacks, but they were still unable to stop them. However, when the army attacked, the two of them went to kill the frenzied army first without prior agreement. After 1,000 years, the current ranking list was updated once more. Not only was Ling Han's first place unshakable, but his ranking on the overall ranking list had also jumped by a large margin. Wu Haoyang's ranking directly rose to 7th place. It was likely that when the next ranking list was updated, he would already be 2nd place. After fighting for another 300 years, they finally stopped. However, they didn't retreat. Instead, they sat cross-legged on the side, digesting the insights they gained from the battle. After fighting for so long, they also knew that it was impossible to defeat their opponent with just their current strength. Thus, they could only create stronger ultimate moves in order to gain the upper hand and even crush their opponent. After more than a decade, Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes and jumped up. On the other side, Wu Haoyang did the same. These two people were really two geniuses, and they were also incomparably close. They fought again. Boom boom boom, they fought fiercely. This time, their battle strength had increased slightly, and they fought even more crazily. However, it was still difficult to determine who was superior. After fighting for another 200 years, they stopped again and sat cross-legged in deep thought. 10 years later, they would fight again. Like this, they continued to fight and stop, and very soon, a new millennium was ushered in. Sure enough, after the current ranking list was updated, Wu Haoyang was ranked 2nd, but the gap between his and Ling Han's battle results was even wider. It couldn't be helped. Ling Han wielded an Empyrean treasure, and his destructive power was many times higher than Wu Haoyang's. No one could have imagined that this was actually just the beginning of Ling Han and Wu Haoyang's craziness. 1,000 years passed after another, and the two's current positions on the ranking board were unshakable. Soon, Wu Haoyang also charged into the overall ranking board and began to advance triumphantly. In the blink of an eye, 70,000 years had passed. Ling Han had already reached the 34th rank, while Wu Haoyang had also reached the 99th rank. The two of them together had created an even more astonishing battle record than Xan Qihu and Lin Yulian, and it was possible that they would never be surpassed. At this time, they finally stopped fighting. Both of them knew that it was impossible to overwhelm the other in the quasi-Empyrean realm. Thus, they would compete to see who would break through to the Empyrean realm first, 2nd step, or 3rd step. Although they were unwilling, they had no choice but to admit that the other party was indeed a formidable opponent. With such an opponent, they would be motivated to improve even faster. After returning to his cave dwelling, Ling Han immediately entered a long period of seclusion. He wanted to thoroughly digest the insights he had gained from this long battle. At the same time, he wanted to find a way to defeat Wu Haoyang. Step by step, if he followed the conventional path, it would be impossible for him to surpass the other party. This was because Wu Haoyang's talent was no weaker than his, and the other party even had a 7th-step Empyrean grandfather. This was something that Ling Han couldn't compare with. Thus, if Ling Han wanted to defeat the other party, he would have to find another way. First, he could surpass Wu Haoyang in terms of cultivation speed. This was truly impossible. To compete with a 7th-step Empyrean in terms of accumulation, wasn't that just a joke? Second, he had to find a way to become stronger within the same realm. What to do? In fact, Ling Han already had such an idea. It was just that his realm hadn't reached the required level yet, and he hadn't encountered a strong opponent yet. Thus, he only had a rough idea. Ling Han set his sights on the endless planes of the origin world. Of course, he didn't want to devour these planes. Instead, he wanted to comprehend the unique powers of these planes one by one and then fuse them together to become the strongest first-step Empyrean. This sounded simple, but since ancient times until now, it was absolutely impossible that he was the only one who had thought of this. Why had no one succeeded? Was it too difficult, or did they not know where to start, or was it simply impossible? After Ling Han digested the benefits of this long battle, he went to see Original Born Heavenly Venerate to discuss the possibility of doing this with him. However, Original Born Heavenly Venerate didn't know. He came from the immortal domain plane. In the past, he only knew that there was a foreign domain, but he had never thought about it in this direction. Now, he had to seek advice from great figures like Zhou Heng, Lin Xiaoyang, or even Lin Luo to obtain an answer. It was just that could he meet such great figures whenever he wanted to? Ling Han settled for the next best thing. He took a leave of absence and returned to the #1 martial institution in the world. He wanted to look for Wall. This fellow's knowledge was incomparably vast, and he even had super powerful calculation, analysis, and deduction abilities. Perhaps he would give him an unexpected surprise. After a few decades, he returned to the #1 martial institution in the world. However, to the martial institution that had passed for a few thousand years, it was as if it had happened yesterday. There wasn't the slightest bit of change. Ling Han barged into the martial institution and quickly found Wall. This fellow was working hard to refine immortal metal. This was his cultivation method. Ling Han suddenly thought of the possibility that one day, Wall's body would become as sturdy as an Empyrean treasure. Wall was a brother, and he would settle accounts clearly. If he wanted him to do something, he naturally had to pay the price. For this, Ling Han gave over 100 immortal metal pieces. Many of them were owed, and he couldn't take out so many immortal metal pieces now. Moreover, his reputation was good, and he could be considered a big customer. That was why Wall allowed him to owe first. Wall began to make deductions. His body flickered incessantly. However, this deduction actually lasted for a full 110,000 years. Ling Han cultivated while waiting. If it wasn't for Wall's flickering body, he would have suspected that the other party had died. The difficulty is extremely high, but there is still a success rate of 3.7 trillion. Wall finally spoke. 3.7 parts per million trillion. Ling Han didn't know how Wall calculated this probability, but he knew that this success rate was infinitely close to zero. No wonder no one had ever succeeded since ancient times. Chapter 2743. Wally paused and said, "However, considering that you have already communicated with the void energy, the probability will be reduced by 4 times due to the void energy's repulsion." Ling Han rolled his eyes madly. Didn't that mean that the probability was less than 1 in a billion? Infinitely zero? Wasn't this completely impossible? Ling Han pondered. His future was actually bright. As long as he pressed on, he could become the strongest first-step Heavenly Venerable. His advantage would only disappear when he became a second-step Heavenly Venerable. Those who could become Heavenly Venerables were all geniuses. It was difficult to win against opponents of the same level. Now, Ling Han had 3 Heavenly Venerable precious techniques and was tempered by the void energy. His battle strength could crush all quasi-Heavenly Venerables. He would not be at a disadvantage even if he fought against a true first-step Heavenly Venerable. However, this advantage could only last until the second step. After the second step, he would have to be like everyone else, taking it step by step. Can I first master the 6 types of origin world's essence power, and then master the unique power of a plane? Ling Han asked Wally. If this worked, then he could maintain his advantage until the 6th step Heavenly Venerable. When he reached the 7th step, the number of people in the origin world could be counted on 1 hand or 2. So what if their battle strength was equal? Wally shook his head. After you become a Heavenly Venerable, it will be very difficult to go back and feel the essence power of this world. Even if you have 1 more, you will not be able to feel the essence power of this world. 6th step is your limit. This was meaningless. He could be invincible before the 7th step, But if he could never reach the 7th step, wouldn't he be finished? If it was someone else, the 6th step Heavenly Venerable would not be awesome enough. However, Ling Han's goal had always been to reach the 7th step. He wanted to become the strongest. In other words, if I want to be invincible, I can only try. There is only a 1 in a billion chance. Ling Han frowned. It's a chance that is less than 1 in a billion, Wally corrected him. Ling Han looked at him. Could you not be so serious at this time? All right. Ling Han's confidence suddenly rose. Even if the probability was so low, he still wanted to try. Before this, the plane's unique power had always been weak. You are also a half-step Empyrean, but how strong is he, Wu Haoyang, Lin Yu Lian, and Xan Chihu? They can crush other half-step Empyreans, and it is as easy as flipping a hand for them to pass the rankings. There was no other reason for this. It was because they were body arts tempered by Su Zi or other origin worlds. Once they took a step forward, they would still be able to maintain their advantage and even expand it. But what if it could hold the power of 2 planes, or even 3, 10, 100? Would they still lose to Voidchild and the others? If the quality wasn't good, then the quantity would be good. In a sense, this was equivalent to becoming an 8th step, 9th step, or 10th step Celestial Venerable. Ling Han left the martial arts courtyard after discussing the details with Wall. Initially, he wanted to settle his old grudge by dragging Imperial Void Immortal King and his son out to give them a beating. However, he did not discover the existence of these 2 people. It seemed like they had gone to the foreign battlefield, but it seemed like they did not arrive at the first level. Could it be that Imperial Void Immortal King had already become a Heavenly Venerable? This was not impossible. Imperial Void's freakish talent was actually not inferior to that of the original born Heavenly Venerable, but he had not taken that step because he lacked a bit of good fortune. But even in the celestial realm, he was actually not far from breaking through to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Coming to this super high-level plane, it was very normal for him to soar into the sky. If he broke through, so be it. The present 1st step Heavenly Venerable was only SOSO in Ling Han's eyes. He could completely match them, and if he also became a 1st step Heavenly Venerable, then with the height of Su Zi's energy, torturing other 1st step Heavenly Venerables would be child's play. He spent another few dozen years on the road, and returned to the foreign battlefield. Ling Han discussed with the Empress. After all, no one had passed this path that he wanted to take, and there was no end point at all. He needed to have a good discussion with his wife. Bewitching Maiden Ro and the others also participated. All the women had their own ideas. Some thought that Ling Han did not need to work so hard. As long as he walked step by step, Ling Han could still become one of the strongest Heavenly Venerables, but if he really took this path, he might have to waste innumerable years. But people like the Empress firmly supported Ling Han, and even wanted to accompany Ling Han, advancing into the pseudo-Heavenly Venerable tier in this way, and becoming the strongest Heavenly Venerable tier of 1 step. Ling Han considered carefully, and decided to follow his own heart. Otherwise, he would definitely have a knot in his heart, and he would regret it in future. If he had persisted in the past, just how strong could he have become? Once Ling Han had made a decision, it was impossible to change it. He ran to Heaven's Pivot to ask for leave for himself. Originally, as long as one became a pseudo-Heavenly Venerable, they would have to come here and contribute to the resistance against the madness. This was not someone's responsibility, but rather a duty that everyone had to fulfill. Thus, when Ling Han wanted to ask for an indefinite leave, according to reason, it could not possibly be approved. But his battle achievements were too dazzling, and he had already killed his way into the overall ranking. Who knew how many hundreds or thousands of times the contributions of others, so what if he asked for a bit of leave? Thus, those 2 celestial venerables reported Ling Han's request. Very soon, news came back that it was not allowed. This was approved by the big shot of the 4th level, and it was said that the person who made this decision was surnamed He. He said, if one can have special privileges here, then with great battle achievements, can one still run away at the last moment? When Ling Han heard a celestial venerable's retelling, he immediately guessed that this person must be He Yufeng's father. Fuck, wasn't he too petty? Ling Han secretly clenched his fists, but it was impossible for him to leave the extraterrestrial battlefield for a long time without permission. If everyone was so free and undisciplined, how could they resist the madness? Thus, in the extraterrestrial battlefield, discipline was the most important, and everyone had to follow orders strictly. If Ling Han left without a care, then he could forget about ever coming back. When he came back, he would be captured, and it was not impossible for him to be directly executed. He would be considered a deserter. What to do? Just as Ling Han was fretting over this, another order was sent over. This was an oral order from a big shot, and the person who sent it was Lin Piaoxue. Whose oral order was it? A seventh-step celestial venerable, Lin Luo. Ling Han was a peerless genius, and it was possible that he could advance to the seventh step in the future, changing the situation of the war. Such a talent should be dealt with freely and not rigidly adhered to the rules. Just like this, the two celestial venerables happily approved Ling Han's request for unlimited training. Just like how Wu Jihong determined that Wu Haoyang's breaking of the rules was nonsense with one sentence, Lin Luo also had this kind of authority. A seventh-step celestial venerable was the strongest in the world. Miss Lin, thank you. Ling Han cupped his fists and said to Lin Piaoxue. This was a very big favor. Lin Piaoxue smiled faintly. To be able to make grandfather speak and make an exception to intervene, you are the second one. Ling Han was curious. Then who was the first one? My aunt, Lin Piaoxue said casually. Lin Yu Lian, the little princess of the Lin family, was the most talented genius in history. She was on par with Xian Qihu and was known as the person with the most hope to advance to the seventh step. Ling Han nodded. I will definitely not let down Lord Lin's great kindness. Chapter 2744. Ling Han set off, accompanied by the Empress and the other women. According to his plan, he planned to invite the heavenly venerable of origin birth, the large black dog, the Rain Emperor, and the others. If they could succeed, then whether it was at the first step, the sixth step, or the seventh step, they would be the strongest. Whether they could succeed was unknown, but it was at least worth a try. Unfortunately, only the Empress received permission to leave. She was his wife and had such authority, but others couldn't. The rules couldn't be broken again. After all, Ling Han wasn't a seventh-step heavenly venerable. Ling Han sighed ruefully. Hu Niu had gone somewhere, or it would be great if they were together. She should be on the fifth level, the Empress said. Ling Han nodded. Hu Niu was taken away by a fourth-step heavenly venerable, and should be cultivating on the battlefield of the fifth level. Definitely cultivating, and having her fight with the frenzied army there was equivalent to sending her to her death. We'll find her when we return. The two of them left hand in hand. The others stayed in the Celestial Visitor Inn because of their cultivation level. They strolled slowly, like a celestial couple. If there was no frenzy, how good would it be if we found a place and lived in peace? The Empress suddenly sighed ruefully. For so many years, she had always been fighting with the frenzied army, and had seen much blood and death, so she expressed her sentiments. When we eliminate the frenzy, we'll find a place to live in seclusion, and have a lot of children, Ling Han said smilingly. The Empress's beautiful eyes wandered, and she bit her lip lightly. She was indescribably beautiful. Ling Han was instantly moved, and pulled the Empress into the Celestial Visitor Inn. In any case, there was a long time, so there was no harm in making love first. After traveling for over 300 years, Ling Han and the Empress arrived at the connection point between the fiery frost plane and another plane. That was the Xuanma plane, a high-level plane. There was no war here, but there was a repelling relationship between planes. Thus, there was no man-made disaster here, but there was a natural barrier. Streaks of chaotic qi descended. This was the might of heaven and earth, surpassing the regulations. When the celestial realm and the foreign realm collided, a small world was formed. In the end, the small world was destroyed, and the wild tide of energy that formed still wounded heavenly venerable Wu Lu as he charged through. It could be seen how powerful the might of heaven and earth was. You should also enter the immortal visitor residence. I'll clear the trial, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded, and entered into the immortal visitor pavilion. She did not try to be brave. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, and instantly, multiple golden seals appeared all over his body, forming a golden bell on the surface of his body. He strode forward and charged into the chaotic chi. Boom! The terrible impact hit him, and Ling Han only felt that the golden bell protecting his body trembled and was on the verge of collapse. He hurriedly quickened his pace. Visible to the naked eye, cracks began to appear on the golden bell. In just half an incense stick of time, these cracks had become cracks, and traces of energy began to seep in. Ling Han hurriedly circulated the indestructible heaven scroll with all his might, repairing these cracks with great difficulty. It was extremely terrifying. Now that he had activated the indestructible heaven scroll, his defense had reached the level of a first-step heavenly venerable. He clenched his teeth and endured bitterly, but the deeper he went into this area, the more terrifying the chaotic chi became. The seals on the golden bell continued to dim, and after being forcibly injected with power by Ling Han, it lit up again. This was really too difficult. Ling Han's physical strength was originally limitless, but now, not long after, he felt waves of gasping for breath and only wanted to fall down and sleep for 8 to 10 years. One had to know that he hadn't been this tired even after battling with Wu Haoyang for tens of thousands of years. He spat out blood, and the veins all over his body throbbed. He maintained the indestructible heaven scroll at all costs, or else it wouldn't be a problem of him being in trouble. The immortal visitor residence would definitely be immediately flattened, and all the women would be unable to escape death. For the sake of his lover, Ling Han ignited a strong fighting spirit, glowing with endless fighting spirit. He persisted bitterly, and his footsteps became faster and faster. One day later, Ling Han finally exited this area. He instantly fell down headfirst, feeling as if every bone in his body had been broken, and he had completely no strength left. He lay down like this for 10 years, and only then did Ling Han crawl up. He felt that he had recovered about 10% of his strength. He began to draw on the energy of Su Zi, and only after another 3 years had passed did his strength recover to 80%. He did not continue to sit down, but instead began to advance. The Empress came out, and the two of them sensed this heaven and earth. The spiritual chi here was inferior to that of the fiery frost realm, but it was still incredibly abundant. That was because this was a high-level realm, and was still who knew how many times stronger than the celestial realm. The two of them advanced and searched for a massive volcano. They wanted to sense the unique power of this world, so the closer they got to the core, the easier it would be. However, wanting to go to the core was not something that could be easily accomplished. According to Wally's deduction, they had to search for a large volcano and then enter from the crater of the volcano, and there was a possibility that they could reach the core. A few months later, the two of them discovered a large volcano and immediately snuck in. What was funny was that they encountered a group of adventurers on the way. They probably felt that the Empress was beautiful, and took the initiative to warn them about how dangerous this place was, and so on. In the end, when Ling Han and the Empress directly leaped into the crater of the volcano, their eyes almost popped out. After searching for a while, Ling Han and the Empress both shook their heads. The temperature of the flames here was very high, but it was barely enough to melt divine metal. It would take countless years, and the bottom was also very shallow, so they very quickly touched it. Naturally, it was impossible for it to reach the core. Ling Han and the Empress left and continued their search. In the following days, they continued to search, and naturally did not neglect their cultivation. Finally, after 7,000 years, they found a super volcano. In the legends of the Xuanmo realm, this was an absolute forbidden land, and even celestial kings had to be restrained. Yet Ling Han was unafraid, and after so many years of recultivation, the Empress had more or less grasped the regulations of this place, and once again possessed the battle prowess of the ninth heaven. They entered the volcano, and the high temperature assaulted them. The Empress immediately exclaimed in shock. This temperature was too high. Ling Han drew the Empress into the celestial visitor residence, and dived down alone. This volcano was incredibly deep. Ling Han dove for 10 days, but still did not reach the bottom, and at this time, even the magma had turned dark red. This destructive power was too great, forcing Ling Han to have no choice but to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll to be able to withstand it. After 3 years, Ling Han finally reached the end. At this point, the magma had already disappeared, and there were only rocks of all shapes and sizes, and there was a stretch of nothingness in front of them, and in the center of the nothingness, an 18-colored sphere was currently floating there, exuding an indescribable might. Unapproachable, untouchable, this was the core of the plane. The might of heaven and earth was actually incredibly powerful, but because it was limited by the regulations, it could only unleash a small portion. However, if anyone wanted to touch the core of the plane, that would incite the full backlash of the heaven and earth, and that would be too dangerous. A 7-step heavenly venerable had this kind of qualification, and could even destroy the core of a high-grade plane, but Ling Han definitely could not do it. He did not dare to approach at all and stayed far away. If he came any closer, he would be turned into ashes by the terrifying power. The Empress also left the celestial visitor residence and sat down at an even further place. The two of them began to sense the power of this plane, comprehending that unique power that belonged to the Xuanmo realm. If a 9th heaven celestial king wanted to advance into the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, the first step was to sense that unique power of heaven and earth, but how many people in a single plane could achieve this? It was too difficult. Thus, even if the Empress and Ling Han were both incredible prodigies, there was still no movement in the short term. Chapter 2746. There's danger. This was Ling Han's first reaction. With his cultivation level, his spirit would react immediately if he entered a dangerous place. But he immediately shook his head. This place was peaceful and didn't look like a dangerous place at all. His divine sense was all-encompassing, so there was definitely no elite approaching. Could it be that something had happened to the people around him? That was impossible. This kind of sudden inspiration could only happen in one dimension at most. The women were all in the Celestial Visitor Inn, and the Empress was definitely in another dimension, so where did the reaction come from? At first, he thought this was an illusion. He had buried himself in cultivation for too long, and that was why his mind was muddled. He wanted to ignore it, but not long after, the throbbing in his heart became more and more intense, and he couldn't ignore it at all. What's going on? Ling Han decided to slow down his search for the Earth's core. He had to deal with the source of this throbbing, or he wouldn't be able to cultivate properly. This was the martial Jing dimension, a low-level dimension. The strongest elites of this dimension were 7 second-step heavenly venerables. Because they were too far away, they didn't receive the order from the fiery frost dimension and called themselves kings in their own territory. Of course, second-step heavenly venerables were indeed very powerful, and this was the limit that a low-level dimension could accommodate. Otherwise, they would either leave, or the dimension would shatter. Actually, it wasn't that the fiery frost dimension couldn't reach over, but starting from the martial Jing dimension, all the other low-level dimensions had too few elites, so the elites of the fiery frost dimension couldn't be bothered to waste this time. The cultivators here were extremely passionate about dimensional wars, because the connected middle-level dimensions didn't invade them, so they could invade the next low-level dimension with all their strength. Now, they were almost at the hope of victory. The elevation of the dimension could open the upper limit of the cultivation level, and those second-step heavenly venerables were all looking forward to this day. And family? That rebellious girl still hasn't changed her mind? Antian asked, his face full of anger, and the pressure was astonishing. Of course. He was a second-step heavenly venerable, and could kill a peak 9th heaven celestial king with a glance. Father, that's your biological daughter. Don't you know little sister's temper? A young man on the side said with a bitter smile. There were 9 lights twining around him, and he was a 9th heaven celestial king. This was a low-level plane. A second-step heavenly venerate and a 9th firmament immortal king were forces that could crush the world. Antian raised his hand and wanted to slap the armrest, but he didn't manage to do so after raising his hand for a long time. He let out a long sigh. I've been too indulgent with that girl. I've never cared about her matters, but she's actually talking about marriage with a dog from Sudu Plain. How can I endure this? Su-Du plane was the plane that the Martial Crystal plane wanted to destroy and devour. That little bastard. How dare he seduce my daughter? If I capture him, I'll definitely tear him to pieces, snorted Entaian. Father! Right at this moment, a young man ran in. I've just received news that we've achieved a great victory on the front lines. We've captured a large number of the enemy's members. That brat Ling Fifan is among them. Entaian burst into laughter after a momentary daze. Bring him here for me. I've already sent someone, said the young man. He was also a 9th Firmament Celestial King. He was Entaian's second son, and his name was Pinghai. The first 9th Firmament Celestial King hesitated, and said, Father, are you really going to kill that brat? Little sister doesn't seem to be playing around this time. What if she's too sad? He was Entaian's eldest son, and his name was Pingtian. Entaian glared at him. That's the scum of Su-Du Plain. If my beloved daughter marries him, isn't that tantamount to me colluding with the enemy? I'll definitely kill that brat. After at least a month, Ling Fifan was finally brought to the Yin clan. After all, he wasn't a heavenly venerable, so he couldn't travel too quickly. At the door, Entaian personally walked out. He wanted to know what kind of extraordinary ability this Ling Fifan had to be able to move his beloved daughter's heart. A young man was sitting on the ground. He didn't have any shackles on him, but his cultivation level had been sealed. Even if no one was guarding him, he couldn't run very far in a day. A mountain river tier cultivator could catch up with him with a single step. Thus, this young man was very carefree. He sat on the ground with a frivolous smile on his face. If one looked closely, they would find that he bore at least 30% resemblance to Ling Han. Not only did they look alike, but they also had that kind of charm. Entaian humphed. How dare you sit still after seeing me? Ling Fifan rolled to his feet. He clasped his hands in salute and bowed respectfully. Entaian was even more displeased. How on earth did such a spineless person move his daughter's heart? Greetings, father-in-law, Ling Fifan said. Entaian was instantly at a loss for words. Fuck, how is this a spineless person? He's practically a hooligan who doesn't fear death. Pooh! And Pinghai couldn't help but laugh. Entaian's scalp instantly twitched. This brat actually dared to laugh at his old man? He was tired of living. And Pinghai gritted his teeth. The old man was in a fit of anger, so this slap really hurt him. You've only just become a celestial king. What makes you think you deserve to be my son-in-law? Entaian said. Although he hated this brat who seduced his daughter, he had to admit that this brat had some guts. It was precisely because of this that he was willing to say a few more words. Ling Fifan revealed an embarrassed expression. I actually don't have many merits. I'm just a little handsome, honest, and have great potential. It's not a problem for me to become a celestial lord in the future. The corner of Entaian's mouth twitched a little. You're really embarrassed? Are you sure you're not boasting? He detested such frivolous, flamboyant people. Kill him. Kill him, he said with a wave of his hand. Father! A woman's voice came from inside the residence. Then, a delicate and beautiful woman ran out, followed by Pingtian. She grabbed Entaian's arm. Father, you can't kill him. This woman was Entaian's only daughter and youngest child. Her name was Xiao. She was only a few million years old, and she was doted on by Entaian. Entaian couldn't help but glare at his eldest son. I told you to take care of your sister and not let her come out, but you just turned a deaf ear. Otherwise, how could a 9th heaven celestial king fail to catch up to a young celestial king who had just broken through? Why can't I kill him? He asked with his beard curled up. Because I'm already pregnant with his child. And Xiao? Said through gritted teeth. Ah. Ling Fifan's mouth opened wide. He thought to himself, I've only touched your little hand. How can you get pregnant like that? This girl is really going all out to save me. However, Entaian was mad with anger. His black hair fluttered even though there was no wind. With a ferocious look on his face, he glared at Ling Fifan. Brat, you're so audacious that you even dare to touch my beloved daughter. He only wanted to kill now. He reached out his hand and grabbed Ling Fifan. "Father, if you dare to touch him, I'll kill myself." And Xiao said in a resolute tone. Chapter 2747. Antian forcibly withdrew his hand, but with a sweep of his will, and Xiao immediately collapsed to the ground. He was too powerful. He didn't even need to lift a finger to subdue a mere first heaven celestial king. "Ping, and take your sister back," he ordered. "Father." And Ping Tian took a step forward, wanting to persuade his father. Antian glared at him. And Ping Tian didn't dare to say anything else. In the Yin family, only his little sister wasn't afraid of their father. The other 7 brothers were all extremely respectful of the old man. Antian looked at Ling Fifan again. "This brat must die." Ling Fifan sighed. "Come, I'm going to die here today. Father-in-law, why don't you think about it a little more? It's really hard to find a son-in-law like me. You're about to die, and you still have a glib tongue." Antian disliked Ling Fifan even more. He admired mature and steady children, such as the 3rd son of the Yang family, who had become a 9th heaven celestial king after cultivating for less than 3 billion years, and had a chance of becoming a celestial lord in the future. This was a good match for his beloved daughter. He suddenly started and looked up. Xiao, a figure landed. It was a man with messy hair, and his appearance was unclear. He could only see that his clothes were tattered, and he looked like a beggar. This was, of course, Ling Han. He followed his heart palpitations and found his way here, and that restrained young man was the source of his palpitations. Who was he? Why did he cause such emotions in his heart? In this epoch, he had been cultivating all the time, and didn't take care of his appearance. Although his clothes were treasures, they were gradually rotting in the harsh environment. "For you?" And Ping Hai immediately stood up and asked. Ling Han didn't care. He just stared at Ling Fifan. Why did this person make him feel something? It was obvious that this person was in danger and could be killed at any time, but what did that have to do with him? Why did this person look a little like him? "What's your name?" Ling Han asked. He said the first word very hoarsely, and it was the first time he had spoken in an epoch. However, when he said the last word, he recovered, and he had an indescribable grandeur. "I am Ling Fifan." "Greetings, senior," Ling Fifan hastily said. This might be his life-saving straw. Of course, he had to grab hold of it. "Ling Fifan," Ling Han muttered. His surname was also Ling. Could it be that he was related to him? But he only had one son, Ling Jianxue. Could this be his grandson or great-grandson? "You all." And Ping Hai was infuriated. He was a 9th-level immortal king. How could his words carry so little weight? Furthermore, there was even a second-step heavenly venerable standing in front of them. Was it really okay for them to ignore him? "Who is Ling Jianxue to you?" Ling Han asked again. This time, Ling Fifan was really surprised. Originally, he was just grasping at straws, but he didn't expect that this person actually had some relationship with the Ling family. He was stunned for a moment and then said, "That's my father." Then he asked, "Senior, who are you?" "This is my grandson." Ling Han was astonished. Ling Jianxue, this brat, had actually given birth to a grandson. But thinking about it again, an epoch had already passed. Not to mention a grandson, he should already have many great-grandchildren. "You all." And Ping Hai gritted his teeth. This was too much. "Ping Hai." Antian, on the other hand, muttered to himself. Although this man in front of him was dressed in rags and slovenly, and didn't have the slightest aura circulating, he gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. Where did this expert come from? And Ping Hai didn't have his father's brilliant insight. Before he came, he had seen all the celestial venerables in the entire plane, and there was no one like Ling Han among the 9th-level immortal kings. So what did he have to be afraid of? Take him down. He reached out and grabbed at Ling Han. An ominous glint flashed in Ling Han's eyes. Back then, hundreds of thousands of quasi-celestial venerables had died in his hands, and a mere 9th level dared to attack him? But he immediately remembered that this wasn't the foreign battlefield, and this person wasn't a mortal enemy. But when his eyes swept over in Ping Hai, he couldn't help but take a step back. He felt as if he was being stared at by a prehistoric giant beast, and he was so frightened that he almost spat out his guts. Antaeon didn't have time to comfort his son. He stared at Ling Han and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" The words of a second-step celestial venerable were naturally different. The wind and clouds suddenly rolled, and heaven and earth wailed. Only then did Ling Han take a good look at Antaeon and nodded. "My name is Ling Han." Ling Fifan choked. This guy was actually his grandfather. How could there be such a coincidence? Didn't his grandfather go to a super high-class plane? Why did he suddenly appear here? Grandfather! He blurted out. Ling Han. Antaeon murmured. He had never heard of this name. However, since Ling Fifan called Ling Han grandfather, this person should be an expert from the Shudu plane and an enemy. What's going on? Ling Han asked Ling Fifan. Ling Fifan couldn't confirm Ling Han's identity at the moment, but his relationship with Anxiu wasn't a secret, so he told him everything in full detail. Ling Han nodded and looked at Antaeon. Since these two young people are in love with each other, why do you have to stop them? Nonsense, of course you're happy. It's not your daughter who was cheated away. Antaeon murmured in his heart. On second thought, if they really became in-laws, wouldn't he be a generation lower than Ling Han? How could this be? He was a plain overlord, and there were only people who could be on equal footing with him at most. How could they be superior to him? Does he deserve it? Antaeon pointed at Ling Fifan. Ling Han smiled faintly. He's my grandson. Why wouldn't he deserve it? Although he said this very calmly, it was full of dominance. Even Antaeon was stunned, but he immediately gritted his teeth. Sure enough, they were of the same origin. His grandson was so glib-tongued. As a grandfather, he didn't know where his confidence came from. The Shudu plane was about to be destroyed. Why were you still so arrogant? Then I'd like to see just how capable you are, he said in an awe-inspiring tone. Ling Han stood with his hands behind his back, a little hesitant. If he spent all these years on improving his cultivation, it wouldn't be difficult for him to reach the third or fourth step, let alone the seventh-step Heavenly Lord level. In that case, he could kill a mere second-step Heavenly Lord with one slap. But in fact, he spent all his time and energy on condensing the core. His realm didn't improve at all, but his combat power definitely soared. As to what extent, even Ling Han himself didn't know. He hadn't fought for a very, very long time. Don't use too much strength in your slap. What if you kill your in-laws? Are you scared? Antaeon asked. He was really infuriated by the arrogance of the grandfather and grandson of the Ling family. That was why he made such sarcastic remarks. Ling Han told the truth. I'm thinking about how much strength is more appropriate. It won't be good if I kill you. Ling Fifan nodded in his heart right away. This must be his grandfather. His biological grandfather, for sure. The way he spoke was exactly the same as him. But could Ling Han really do it? Don't blow your own trumpet. Chapter 2748. Antaeon's face twitched a little. This was way too arrogant, way too arrogant. He was a second-step Heavenly Venerable, while Ling Han was at most a second-step Heavenly Venerable from the Shudu dimension. They were merely on equal footing, so what right did he have to say such a thing? No wonder he had a grandson like Ling Fifan. They were definitely related by blood. Don't you think you're too arrogant? Antaeon gritted his teeth. Ling Han smiled. If I have the strength, then I won't be arrogant, but telling the truth. All right, then I'll do it. What strength do you have? Antaeon casually clapped his hands and pressed them towards Ling Han. Ling Han thought about it, then gathered 50% of his strength and punched out as well. Bam! Their feet trembled at the same time, and then a crack spread out from under their feet, instantly covering the entire manor. Boom! This manor that had existed for God knows how long collapsed at once. Clang! Heaven and earth responded at once, and countless lightning bolts struck towards Antaeon, but they didn't target Ling Han. This was because he was only a quasi-heavenly venerable, which was completely within the limits of what the martial Jing dimension could bear. Antaeon naturally wasn't afraid of the lightning strikes, but he was extremely shocked. Ling Han's strength wasn't much inferior to his, so he must also be a second step heavenly venerable. Then why wasn't heaven and earth targeting a second step heavenly venerable? This defied common sense. Thus, Antaeon didn't attack again, but pondered the answer to this question in his heart. Sorry, I'm your nephew by marriage. I've destroyed your house. Ling Han hurriedly apologized with great sincerity. But these words jolted Antaeon out of his reverie. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and he was truly furious. This was his home, which he had lived in for God knows how many years. It was the symbol of the Yin family, as well as one of the symbols of the dimension, but it had been destroyed because of his and Ling Han's actions. Of course, Antaeon wouldn't blame him and would only blame it on Ling Han. Ling Fifan gritted his teeth. This grandfather of his was just like what he had heard. He was born with a halo of trouble, which made things worse. Was he still a nephew by marriage? It would be strange if Antaeon did not go crazy after hearing this. But at the same time, his eyes lit up. It had only been an epoch, yet Ling Han had already become a second-step celestial lord. Awesome. It had to be known that it was difficult for most geniuses to progress in the celestial king realm in an epoch, let alone become a second-step heavenly venerate, the strongest in the plane. Brotherin, why are you so angry? A leisurely voice drifted over. It seemed to come from tens of thousands of kilometers away, but it also seemed to be very close at the same time. Antaeon paused for a moment. Brother Yang. Shua, a figure appeared. This was a young man with a jade-like face, but the hair at his temples was white, and his eyes revealed the vicissitudes of life. His aura was not obvious. He waved his hand, and a person appeared out of thin air. He was also an extraordinarily handsome young man with 9 beams of light revolving around him. He was a 9th heaven immortal king. Once this young man appeared, he immediately bowed respectfully to Antaeon. Yang Xianlong greets Lord An. Antaeon smiled, and his gaze toward this young man was full of affection. This was the ideal son-in-law in his heart. Yang Xianlong was the 7th son of the second-step heavenly venerate Yang Jihe, and also the youngest son. However, it was said that the 7 sons of the Yang family were all like dragons, and the 7 were the strongest. Yang Xianlong was not the first among the 7 to reach the 9th heaven, but he was definitely the strongest. Such an outstanding talent could become a heavenly venerate. Dispense with the formalities. He raised his hand, and then looked at the man with white hair at his temples. Brother Yang, what brings you here? This person was Yang Jihe. Yang Jihe first glanced at Ling Han and Ling Fifan, and then said leisurely, the Shudu plane is about to be breached. I want to form an alliance with Brotherin, and when the time comes, we will advance and retreat together. Antaeon was immediately awestruck. The destruction and devouring of a plane was also full of opportunities for heavenly venerates like them, because the plane's core would be exposed. Even if they could not snatch it, it would still overflow with powerful energy, and they might be able to comprehend the 3rd essential power. Whether they could advance 3 steps was very crucial. However, there were a total of 7 second-step heavenly venerates in the Martial Jing plane, and competition was inevitable. If they could form an alliance with other second-step heavenly venerates, they would naturally have a higher chance of winning. Antaeon nodded. That's a good suggestion. This answer was naturally within Yang Jihe's expectations. He smiled and continued. Previously, Little 7 has been only focused on cultivating and has yet to marry. Today, I specially brought him here to propose to Brotherin. I hope that Brotherin can betroth your beloved daughter to this good-for-nothing kid. Yang Xianlong stood up again and bowed to Antaeon. Xianlong has admired Miss Xiu, for a long time. I hope that Lord An can grant my wish. A verbal alliance was naturally unreliable, but in-laws were much safer. One was the most promising youngest son of the Yang clan, and the other was the little princess of the Yin clan. Such a combination would naturally make the alliance unbreakable. Antaeon immediately looked tempted. He liked Yang Xianlong very much to begin with, and coupled with the matter of an alliance, he almost wanted to agree without any further consideration. Ling Fifan panicked and hurriedly called out to Ling Han, Grandpa, if you don't say a few words, your granddaughter-in-law is going to fly away. Ling Han sighed. Why was it that even marrying a granddaughter-in-law had to involve a fight? Was he really a jinx? That in-law's eldest nephew, he said. Ling Fifan really wanted to vomit blood, while Yang Xianlong and Yang Jihe found it strange. Who was this guy who looked like a beggar? He actually called Tan his eldest nephew. Who would dare to call him a second-step heavenly venerate? Taiyun's face was extremely dark, and his eyes were almost spitting fire. He had an urge to kill someone. Ling Han waved his hand and smiled. Alright, let's not talk about this for now. Ahem, I've also brought my grandson here today to propose marriage. I hope the clan can agree to this marriage. Sure. Taiyun said coldly. Yang Xuanlong's expression changed at once, but Yang Jihe didn't care at all. He knew Taiyun very well. Sure enough, Taiyun said again, which of the maidservants here do you like? Marry her. Previously, Ling Han had always called him eldest nephew, and now he wanted to return the favor to Ling Han. Ling Han was taken aback for a moment, and then he couldn't help but burst into laughter. Wow, you have a sense of humor too. Now I'm looking forward to this granddaughter-in-law of mine. She should be very interesting. What's wrong with my grandson? Although his cultivation is a little lacking, it'll be a piece of cake for him to defeat that little loach in a battle of the same level. He hooked an arm around Ling Fifan's neck and pointed at Yang Xianlong. Yang Xianlong was furious. You can praise your grandson all you want, but why do you have to use me as a stepping stone? He snorted and said, I can suppress this kind of trash with a flip of my hand. Of course, Ling Fifan wouldn't back down. He pointed at Yang Xianlong and said, in a battle of the same level, you're just a bug. I can crush you to death with one foot. Ling Han was all smiles. Ling Jianxue was too steady and lacked fun. He was far less fun than this grandson of his, who suited his taste. Do you dare to fight? He added fuel to the fire. Chapter 2750. Ling Fifan looked at Ling Han in surprise. Was this Ling Han's means? It was too shocking. In just 3 days, although it felt like several years, his strength had been reborn. He was simply a god. Brat, hurry up and wash up. Prepare to snatch the bride. Ling Han kicked his butt. Ling Fifan came back to his senses and immediately ran away. A short while later, Ling Han and Ling Fifan exited the immortal visitor's residence and headed towards the Yin clan. It had to be said that the Yin family's methods were astonishing. In less than 3 days, the Yin family had already been completely rebuilt. It exuded the domineering aura of an Empyrean family. Those without a strong enough will couldn't even approach it. Their legs would turn to jelly. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back and walked leisurely. Ling Fifan followed behind him obediently. How are your parents now? Ling Han asked. They are so in love with each other that it's as if they are conjoined together. They don't separate from each other no matter what they do. Ling Fifan was playing with a saber in his hand, which was the immortal artifact that Ling Han had just made for him. With Ling Han's current strength, polishing immortal metal into a weapon was naturally something that could be done with a single thought. They've been traveling around all day, and they've even passed through many planes. Now, they're helping Su Du Plain to resist the invasion, so I can only follow them as a soldier, but I've been captured. Ling Fifan sighed. Ling Han was astounded. Being able to shuttle between planes, could it be that Ling Jianxue had already become a celestial master? What is your father's current cultivation level? He asked. A 9th firmament immortal monarch. Ling Han was even more puzzled. A 9th firmament immortal king could travel between planes. Was such strength enough? Father was very lucky and obtained a mysterious bead. As long as he uses it, he can hide his tracks. Even a heavenly venerable won't be able to discover him, Ling Fifan explained. Ling Han came to a realization. Otherwise, he really did not believe that a 9th heaven immortal king could do this. However, if he traveled the 10,000 worlds, he might be able to obtain an opportunity to become a quasi-Empyrean. This was Ling Jianshue's cultivation method. As they spoke, the two of them arrived at the entrance of the Yin residence. There were already people waiting here. When they saw the two of them, they immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, Lord." He was saluting Ling Han, but Ling Fifan nodded his head casually as if he was saluting him, which made the man furious. Ling Han was a third heavenly layer immortal king. Ling Han raised his hand. Lead the way. The third firmament immortal king didn't dare say anything in front of Ling Han. He obediently led the way. Soon, the three of them arrived at the living room. Antian and Yang Jihe were sitting in the host and guest seats respectively, while Xiao and Yang Xianlong stood behind them. When it came to Ling Fifan, Xiao's beautiful eyes immediately lit up. Yang Xianlong clenched his fists tightly upon seeing this. He swore in his heart that he would find an opportunity to kill Ling Fifan later. He had only met Xiao a few times before and didn't really like her. However, for the sake of his father's great plan, he had to marry Xiao. In fact, he didn't dislike this. Xiao was a true young lady from a prestigious family. She was also delicate and pretty, completely worthy of him. Therefore, he didn't object to this marriage. However, his wife was already flirting with another man even before they were married. How could he not want to kill her? Wasn't what men hated the most when they were cuckolded? Let's start the match. Antian raised his hand, and a small pagoda floated in the air. It had 9 floors and was completely golden. Chaotic chi circulated around it, as if the world had just been created. This was an Empyrean treasure weapon. Since 2 immortal kings were fighting, it was naturally better to enter the space inside. Otherwise, the residence that had just been rebuilt might collapse again. The 2 young men moved their feet and were about to enter. Fifan, be careful, and Xiao couldn't help but say, "Don't worry, I can fight 10 of these trash at once." Ling Fifan waved his hand. He was really carefree. Yang Xianlong was half dead with anger. His killing intent intensified. He stepped into the space inside the pagoda. He had already decided to kill Ling Fifan. Even Antian and Yang Jihe didn't look too good. Antian said, "Xiao, girls should be reserved." Yang Jihe snorted to show his dissatisfaction. Ling Han laughed. "Little girl, come. And Xiao already knew his identity. She immediately walked over and bowed slightly. "Xiao greets the old man." Ling Han took out a spatial artifact and handed it over. "Here, this is a greeting gift. Take it." "Thank you, old man." And Xiao said obediently. She couldn't help but open her mouth when she scanned it with her divine sense. There were countless high-level immortal medicines and a few pieces of immortal gold inside. Such a greeting gift was really generous. Meanwhile, the battle between Ling Fifan and Yang Xianlong also began inside the celestial treasure. In this space, Antian had the final say. He used the celestial treasure to suppress Yang Xuanlong's cultivation to the first heavenly layer. Even so, Yang Xianlong definitely had a great advantage. First, his cultivation was at the peak of the first heavenly layer. Second, he was more sensitive to laws and could use them more meticulously. However, Ling Fifan's attack shocked him. Ling Fifan didn't use any laws at all. He just rushed up and bombarded him. This was too tasteless. What was the difference between him and a scoundrel in a marketplace? Was he still an immortal king? However, he immediately discovered that Ling Fifan's fists were astonishingly heavy. Every time he received a punch, his chest felt like it was boiling and he wanted to vomit blood. Moreover, not only were they heavy, but they were also fast. He couldn't even react in time. He was originally very confident that his opponent was more monstrous than him. He could still use the celestial treasure technique, which was absolutely impossible for Ling Fifan to resist. However, he didn't have the chance to use the celestial treasure technique now. Bam, bam, bam. Ling Fifan's furious fists rained down, not giving Yang Xianlong any chance to use his ultimate move. "What a blind guy! How dare you have designs on my wife?" Ling Fifan said disdainfully as he continued to throw punches. Yang Xianlong had no time to retort. He could only defend in this kind of battle. However, there was always a loophole. Defense was passive. The attacker could fail 100 times or even 10,000 times, but if the defender made a single mistake, the consequences would be disastrous. Under Ling Fifan's bombardment, Yang Xianlong was quickly hit by a punch. his bones broke and he groaned in pain. He hurriedly retreated. If this continued, he would definitely lose. Once he had enough distance, he began to prepare his ultimate move. Ling Fifan, it's all over now. He raised his hands, and white flames danced in his palms. The bright white flame could incinerate everything. Ling Fifan couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed. He had originally thought that he wouldn't give Yang Xianlong any chance to use his ultimate move. However, a genius was a genius after all, and he had still managed to break free. He shook his hands. Even his bones hurt. After all, his physical skills had increased rapidly, and he didn't have a physique to match them. The previous high-intensity battle had put a great burden on him. "Stop daydreaming. You'll only be beaten to a pulp by me," he said with a smile. Chapter 2751. Outside, Antaiyan and Yang Jihe were both shocked. Ling Fifan was so strong. Suppressing others with physical techniques is the fighting style of a celestial venerable. Could it be that this brat could already communicate with the unique power of heaven and earth to temper himself? The two celestial venerables exchanged a look, both filled with confusion. A celestial king in the first heaven could communicate with the unique power of a realm? This was truly unacceptable, no matter how talented he was. However, was there any other explanation? Antaiyan couldn't help but be moved. Yang Xianlong could only become a celestial venerable, but if Ling Fifan could really communicate with the unique power of heaven and earth, then he would definitely become a celestial venerable in the future. He actually didn't care which realm Ling Fifan was from. A celestial venerable naturally had a corresponding breadth of mind. What he cared about was potential and temperament. And Xiao was also surprised. In a girl's mind, her lover was naturally omnipotent, but she was also a celestial king and the daughter of a celestial venerable, so her judgment was naturally extraordinary. Ling Fifan definitely hadn't been this strong before. What's going on? Ling Han, on the other hand, was slightly dissatisfied. In fact, Ling Fifan's strength should be more than this, but his physique wasn't strong enough, so he couldn't unleash his full strength. Otherwise, his body would collapse first. How should he pass on the indestructible heaven's scroll to his grandson? Ling Han was troubled. Unless he could borrow the Black Tower and forcefully impart it to his grandson like how he had learned the indestructible heaven's scroll. Or he could modify the indestructible heaven's scroll, like the 9 transformations heaven scroll, so he could master it part by part and finally fuse it. It was impossible to borrow the Black Tower now, so Ling Han felt that the latter method was more reliable. He immediately began to ponder, thinking about how to dismantle the indestructible heaven scroll. In the celestial venerable treasure, Yang Xianlong began to counterattack. He charged at Ling Fifan, waving the bright flames in his hands, which turned into 2 white snakes that charged at Ling Fifan. Ling Fifan laughed and met him fearlessly. "You're courting death," Yang Xianlong said in his mind. He activated the celestial venerable treasure technique, and his battle prowess was comparable to that of a third heaven celestial king. Die quickly." When the white flame serpent touched Ling Fifan's body, a golden bell immediately appeared on his body, and on the bell, there were golden symbols jumping. The golden bell blocked the white snake, making it unable to advance any further. Yang Xuanlong's jaw dropped. How was this possible? He had never thought that Ling Fifan could have grasped the Empyrean Paragon technique. It was very simple. Even if there was an Empyrean standing behind him, it would still be useless. After all, in order to use the Empyrean Paragon technique, one had to be at least at the 9th heavenly layer. Even if it was him, he could at most circulate it for the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, and even then, it would still hurt his muscles and bones. However, Ling Fifan had managed to block his heavenly venerate technique. There was only one possibility. He had also mastered the heavenly venerate technique. How is that possible? He was dumbfounded. He had thought that he would be able to destroy his opponent easily, but in the end, he found that he was the one who was going to be harvested. "Ah, little loach, what else do you have to say?" Ling Fifan hastily attacked. This defensive energy didn't belong to him, so once it was activated, it couldn't be withdrawn. Furthermore, it could only last for the time it takes an incense stick to burn. If Yang Xianlong avoided him now and waited for his defense to disappear before activating the Heavenly Venerate technique, then he would be out of luck. Thus, he had to finish off his opponent as soon as possible. Bang bang bang. He furiously swung his fists, wanting to flatten his opponent with a thunderous momentum. Yang Xuanlong's fighting spirit had already fallen to rock bottom, and he didn't have the strength to resist. After barely resisting a few blows, he was beaten black and blue all over. Fortunately, Ling Fifan didn't intend to kill him. He only heavily injured Yang Xianlong and made him lose the ability to fight again. Antian shook the two of them out in time and said, "That's enough. Let's stop here." Extraordinary. And Xiaoyun hastily ran over, her face full of surprise. She hadn't expected that the matter between her and Ling Fifan would be resolved so smoothly. "Hee, I told you long ago that I would settle all my troubles and marry you." Ling Fifan started to brag. You're cheating," Yang Jihe said coldly. Even now, the golden bell was still flickering on Ling Fifan's body. This was too obvious. He brazenly reached out to grab Ling Fifan. "Cheater, die." If he killed Ling Fifan, then his son would have no opponents. "Brother Yang, please be lenient." Antian hastily stopped him. He had also come out. Ling Fifan's defensive ability was abnormal. He could release it but not retract it. It didn't seem like his own ability, but rather some kind of treasure. But he didn't care, because Ling Fifan had already displayed his monstrous talent. He was only a first heaven immortal king, but he could use this plane's unique power to temper his body. He would definitely become a heavenly venerate in the future. If he missed such a good son-in-law, there wouldn't be another one. Thus, he had to protect Ling Fifan. Bang! The two heavenly venerates clashed, and the shockwaves spread out, turning the entire clan into ruins. "Brother, and I didn't do it on purpose." Yang Jihe hastily stopped. Destroying someone's residence was a serious matter. Antian's face darkened. It had only been 3 days, but his clan had been destroyed twice. Who had he provoked? Ling Han stood out. "You want to kill my grandson?" He cheated in a fair competition, and he had bad intentions. "So what if I kill him?" Yang Jihe said arrogantly. He naturally didn't need to be polite in front of Ling Han. This was a competitor, and he didn't think that Ling Han could be that strong. "No one can touch my family. Since you want to kill my grandson, then I'll send you on your way first," Ling Han said coldly, his eyes cold. Battle in the sky. Yang Jihe stomped on the ground and flew straight into the sky. He didn't dare to start a battle here. Otherwise, he would turn this place into a vast ocean, and Antian would probably really go crazy. Ling Han naturally wasn't afraid of him. He bent his legs slightly, and then burst forth with power. Peng, he shot up, his speed far exceeding Yang Jihe's. Thus, Yang Jihe hadn't even reached the apex when Ling Han had already caught up. Boom, he immediately punched out with a furious punch. Yang Jihe was both furious and shocked. Why didn't you fucking care about your status at all? Why did you attack so hastily? But Ling Han's attack was fast and fierce, and he had no choice but to react. Peng He and Ling Han collided. Amidst the loud noise, the space shattered, and the two of them were sent flying. Quang, heaven and earth immediately reacted. Lightning flashed and struck towards Yang Jihe, but it ignored Ling Han. Yang Jihe didn't understand. His opponent had clearly used the power of a second-step heavenly venerable, so why wasn't he targeted by heaven and earth? Even though such a blow wouldn't hurt a heavenly venerable, he carefully sensed it. However, he turned pale with shock. You didn't use the power of a heavenly venerable. What was the most prominent power of a heavenly venerable? It was the intrinsic power of the 6 origin worlds, or the unique power of a plane. But in that punch from Ling Han just now, he didn't feel that Ling Han had used any of those powers. "You're a quasi-heavenly venerable," he shouted again, but his expression became even more unsightly. Chapter 2752. Ling Han was a quasi-celestial venerable, which explained why heaven and earth didn't target him. Moreover, a quasi-celestial venerable naturally couldn't use the 7 strongest powers. But the problem was, a quasi-celestial venerable could stand shoulder to shoulder with a second-step celestial venerable? Was the world about to be turned upside down? Antaeon also turned pale with fright. How is this possible? But when he thought about it carefully, when he had exchanged blows with Ling Han previously, he had been in a fit of anger and hadn't thought much about it. Now that he thought about it again, sure enough, he hadn't discovered that Ling Han had used the intrinsic power of heaven and earth. This guy's strength lay in his own body, but he had reached the point where he could rival a second-step celestial venerable. No way, Ling Fifan muttered. Fuck, this grandfather of his was too ferocious. A quasi-celestial venerable could fight a second-step celestial venerable, an unprecedented feat. A mere quasi-celestial venerable is also worthy of being on equal footing with me. After a moment of shock, Yang Jihe became furious. There was also a clear divide between celestial venerables, and a quasi-celestial venerable was just a quasi-celestial venerable. He was much weaker than a second-step celestial venerable. So what if you're a second-step celestial venerable? How can I beat you up? Ling Han said coldly. Today, he was going to kill a second-step celestial venerable for fun. I'll kill you. Yang Jihe charged out. He directly used the celestial venerable paragon technique, and 2 balls of white flames leaped out from his hands. With a wave, he attacked Ling Han. Previously, Yang Xianlong had also used this move, but the 2 balls of flames had only turned into snakes. However, a second-step celestial venerable was completely different. The 2 balls of flames had turned into heaven-burning flames, and the entire sky was illuminated by such flames. Ling Han snorted and activated the indestructible heaven scroll. A golden bell appeared, and symbols flickered. He charged at Yang Jihe, his fists furiously swinging. Yang Jihe naturally wouldn't be afraid, and chose to fight head-on with Ling Han. Celestial venerables all used 7 intrinsic powers to temper their bodies. The higher their cultivation level, the more types of power they could draw. A first-step celestial venerable could only draw 1 type, and a second-step celestial venerable could draw 2. Every celestial venerable had an outstanding body technique. Because the limit of the laws was only the 9th level of heaven, they could only be used to assist in battle. Yang Jihe's body technique wasn't any weaker than Ling Han's. After all, he was a second-step Empyrean and had already used one of the 6 essential powers to temper his body. Moreover, it was unknown just how many epochs had passed. The 2 of them clashed, and every attack caused space to shatter. Countless stars fell, affecting the entire Wujing world. Thus, it only took a few days for other Empyreans to rush over. A battle between Empyreans was no small matter. There were second-step Empyreans, first-step Empyreans, and quasi-Empyreans. Although this was a low-level plane, it was infinitely close to a mid-level plane. Thus, the number of Empyreans was quite considerable. When they discovered that Yang Jihe's opponent was only a quasi-Empyrean, their jaws dropped in shock, unable to utter a single word. How can there be such a fierce quasi-Empyrean in this world? Brother An, do you know who this person is? A second-step celestial venerable asked Antaeon. My daughter's future husband's grandfather? Of course, Antaeon wouldn't say this. He could only shake his head and say, I'm not very sure either. This was the truth. Apart from knowing Ling Han's name, he didn't have any other information. All the powerhouses were curious and vigilant at the same time, because this quasi-Empyrean was definitely not from their plane. What if he came from Shudu plane? Would this change the already predestined outcome? Destroying Shudu plane, raising the level of this plane, and comprehending the essential power of the origin world in the process is the only opportunity for us in this epoch. We mustn't let anyone stop us, these powerhouses said one after another. Once Yang Jihe was defeated, they would gang up on him and never let Ling Han leave alive. Of course, only second-step Empyreans and first-step Empyreans were qualified to make a move. First-step Empyreans would have to join forces, or they would be blown up in minutes. Antaeon thought about it and said, perhaps this person comes from a higher-level plane. All the powerhouses looked at each other. Although the neighboring middle-level plane didn't invade them, it wasn't as if they didn't have defenses set up. They still set up heavy defenses at the passage between the two planes, with powerhouses keeping watch. They should be thankful that the higher-level plane didn't invade them. Would they dare to take the initiative to invade? Therefore, they were completely unaware of the neighboring middle-level plane. Furthermore, no one from that plane came over, so the two planes weren't connected. It was like water from a well didn't interfere with the river water. Could this person really be a powerhouse from a middle-level plane? It was possible, because this quasi-Empyrean was too strong. But maybe only a higher-level plane could cultivate such a monster. They were all hesitant. If Ling Han was really a martial artist from a higher-level plane, didn't that mean that this plane was finally going to attack them? The higher the level of a plane, the higher the number and quality of powerhouses. It was just like how they could suppress Shudu plane. Moreover, even if that higher-level plane was similar to them, it meant that they would have to transfer a large number of powerhouses to fight. Could they still take down Shudu plane? They were all worried. Fortunately, the plane itself still existed. This was their greatest trump card. However, it was also because of this that they couldn't take down Shudu plane. In the sky, Ling Han was still fighting fiercely with Yang Jihe. Ling Han was fighting very conservatively because he really didn't know how strong he was. He needed to compare it bit by bit. After fighting for a long time, he finally had a more accurate assessment of his combat strength. His regular combat strength had almost reached the peak of Step 2. After using the Empyrean Treasured technique, he was naturally stronger. However, the Empyrean Treasured technique was different, so its power was also different. He couldn't simply say what level he could reach. In fact, this wasn't his full strength. It was just that he was limited by his realm, so he didn't dare to use it. Otherwise, he would kill himself before hurting others. He used the 9 Transformation Heaven scripture to strengthen his combat strength. Then he used the 5 Elements Thunder technique. With his current strength, using 2 Empyrean techniques at the same time was a piece of cake. Yang Jihe also used the Empyrean technique, but he only mastered 1 Empyrean technique. Facing Ling Han's crazy bombardment, he felt like he was besieged by 2 Empyrean techniques of the same level, making it very difficult for him to fight. However, those who could become Empyrean techniques were all the greatest geniuses. Even if Yang Jihe fell into a disadvantageous situation, he still fought tenaciously. He even repeatedly used clever moves and almost turned the situation around. Unfortunately, Ling Han had a 3rd Empyrean technique, the Indestructible Heaven Scroll. He wasn't bad. Yang Jihe was shocked. Was there no end to your power? Using 3 Empyrean techniques at the same time, even a 2nd step Empyrean would quickly collapse from exhaustion. How was a Empyrean strong? Apart from being tempered by intrinsic power and having powerful physical techniques, another thing was that they could use the intrinsic power of heaven and earth. Thus, an Empyrean could truly use the Empyrean techniques. However, no matter what, there would be a time when the power was exhausted. Ling Han's consumption was really abnormal. As an Empyrean, Yang Jihe naturally didn't lack tenacious fighting spirit. However, he gritted his teeth and persisted. As his power continued to be consumed, he became more and more uncertain. If this continued, he would be defeated. Chapter 2754. Yang Jihe landed in front of Ling Fifan and said, "I shouldn't have had the intention to kill you." Ling Fifan picked his ear and said, "What did you say? Is there such an apology? I don't accept it." He waved his hand and said righteously. Now that Ling Han had the upper hand, of course, he had to take advantage of him. What a joke, he should be squashed flat just because he was weak. He was also a human. And Xiao Er's beautiful eyes immediately became misty. She liked her sweetheart's heroic spirit that looked down on the world. Pretentious. The onlookers thought to themselves. At the same time, they were extremely envious of Ling Fifan. To be able to make a 2nd step Empyrean lower his head and apologize, even if it was just a formality, was enough for him to brag about for a lifetime. Ling Han, who was standing beside Ling Fifan, said with a smile, "I don't think this is an apology." "What?" Do you think our old Ling family is easy to bully? His eyes were cold. He was only a quasi-celestial venerable now, but when he stepped into the celestial venerable realm, killing the second step would be as easy as flipping his hand. Yang Jihe's heart tightened. He could indeed ignore Ling Han now, but the other party was only a quasi-Empyrean. Even if the 7 second-step Empyreans here joined forces, would they be able to stop Ling Han? For such a monster, he had to either get rid of him before he was invincible, or he had to lower his head and let go of this grudge. After thinking about it, he finally sighed. I was indeed in the wrong in this matter. I should not have harbored killing intent towards little friend Ling. I hope little friend Ling can forgive me. As he spoke, he even took out a spatial divine tool and handed it to Ling Fifan. Take this as compensation. I hope it can help you calm down. He was apologizing and compensating. For a second-step heavenly venerate, this was the lowest he could go. Ling Fifan walked towards Ling Han. Seeing Ling Han nod his head, Ling Fifan took the spatial artifact and smiled. Senior, you are too polite. Feel free to shout at me in the future, as long as you give me this compensation every time. He scanned it with his divine sense. The number of treasures in the spatial divine tool was truly astonishing. Yang Jihe's mouth twitched in anger, because this was the betrothal gift he had prepared for the Yang family, and even with his family's wealth, he couldn't afford it more than a few times. How many more times do you want to come? Fellow Taoist Ling and fellow Taoists, come and have a seat. Antaiyan extended an invitation. After so many years, the Yin clan had naturally been rebuilt. For second-step Empyreans, as well as Ling Han, entered the Yin family. Some first-step Empyreans also came over, wanting to listen in. Perhaps the 5 superpower houses would discuss martial art and give them a chance to comprehend by analogy. Fellow Ling, where did you come from? After sitting down in the hall, the 4 knights' heavenly lord could not help but ask. Where did such a monstrous genius come from? The plane of the immortal region. Ling Han smiled, not hiding anything. Immortal region plane? All the Empyreans were at a loss. They had never heard of this place. Ling Han explained that the immortal domain plane was the newest plane to be born in the origin world. At least, this was true before the immortal domain plane was connected to the next plane. The Grand Empyreans were all shocked. This kind of plane could nurture a monster like Ling Han. Was that really a super low plane? Ling Han then spoke of the matter of him heading to a super high-grade plane, describing to them an even vaster world. At the same time, there was also a sharp blade hanging over everyone's heads. After learning about an existence like frenzy, all the Empyreans did not look good. They had racked their brains to think of ways to destroy the Shudu plane and use this process to improve their cultivation. But now, it was like 2 people fighting at the mouth of a volcano. No matter who won, as long as the volcano erupted, both of them would only be turned into ashes. I want to advise everyone to stop this meaningless battle and go to the Flames Now plane to resist the invasion of frenzy. Otherwise, once frenzy enters, the entire world will be doomed, Ling Han said. Moreover, the Flames Now plane is a super high plane. It is possible to cultivate to the 7th step. This is the place that martial artists of my generation yearn for. After hearing this, everyone hesitated. Conquering the Shudu plane was their dream for generations. Countless rookies or powerhouses with infinite potential had died on the battlefield. But now, they suddenly stopped fighting and joined forces to fight against frenzy. How could they accept this? Ling Han chuckled. It would have been fine if I hadn't arrived, but since I know that there is internal strife going on here, I will definitely intervene. Either everyone stop fighting, or I will join the Shudu plane. With me joining, do you still think you can conquer the Shudu plane? Everyone gritted their teeth. They felt that Ling Han was a scoundrel. He actually threatened people like this. But this was very realistic. Previously, 3 second-step Empyreans joined forces and were unable to suppress Ling Han. Once such a powerhouse joined the Shudu plane, the other party would not be at a disadvantage even if they did not turn defeat into victory. Fellow Taoist Ling, this is not your war. Why do you have to be such a villain? Empyrean Zhu, he could not help but say. Ling Han shook his head. Everyone, you have not been to the extraterritorial battlefield, so you do not know the cruelty there. The most important thing now is to resist the invasion of frenzy. Otherwise, when the nest is overturned, there will be no eggs left intact. Even if you all reach the third or fourth step, you will only be crushed into slag. Everyone was speechless again, but no one suspected that Ling Han had deliberately fabricated frenzy to scare them. That would be too unworthy of his identity. Let me think about it. All the Empyreans said. This matter was too important, and no one could make a decision so easily. After everyone left, Ling Han and Entaian discussed the marriage between Ling Fifan and Enxiu. The two young people were originally in love with each other, and now that they were well-matched, the marriage was quickly decided. They were not in a hurry to get married. Ling Han first had to go to the Shudu Plain to pick up Ling Jianshui and his wife. In addition, he also had to settle the war between the two plains. Ling Han set off with Ling Fifan, heading to the connection point between the two plains. His current speed was astonishing, and he had arrived at the place in just a few days. This was similar to the Immortal Domain, where there were armies stationed and a large number of martial artists adventuring. Ling Fifan had traveled through many planes with his parents, and had long been accustomed to adapting to the rules of each world. As for Ling Han, he did not care about it at all. He had formed his own power core, so it was the same no matter which world he went to. His strength came from within, so when they arrived at the connection point between the two planes, their combat strength was not affected in the slightest. They integrated into this world without any difficulty, and no one could tell that there was anything different about them. Naturally, no one stopped them, and they easily passed through. Then, they began to cross the two planes. After some effort, they passed through the place where the collision between the two planes was the most intense, and then they arrived at the Shudu Plain. Here, they did not attract anyone's attention, as if they were the natives here. Ling Fifan led the way to the camp here to look for Ling Jianshui and his wife. Ling Fifan. When they arrived at Ling Fifan, everyone in the camp was very shocked. Many of them had been captured after his defeat, so why did he suddenly come back? Reading on the mobile phone is refreshing. Chapter 2755. Ling Fifan, why are you back? Yeah, weren't you captured? How did you come back? Everyone asked curiously. Before Ling Fifan could answer, a young man squeezed through the crowd and glanced at him. Ling Fifan, did you join the enemy? Is that why they let you come back to be a spy? The crowd burst into an uproar when they heard this. Ling Fifan was furious. Jiang Yuran, don't make irresponsible remarks. Your entire family isn't from our plane. It wouldn't be surprising if you betrayed us and surrendered. The young man sneered. His name was Jiang Yuran. As for why he was so against Ling Fifan, it was simple. One of the women he slept with had a very good impression of Ling Fifan, so he would pick on Ling Fifan in all kinds of situations. The opportunity this time was even better. A mere first firmament immortal king had actually returned alive after being taken to an alternate plane. Furthermore, he wasn't injured at all. Who would believe that he escaped back on his own? There must be something fishy going on. You bastard! Ling Fifan was filled with killing intent. This crime was too serious. This person was too evil. If this crime was confirmed, not only him, but his parents would also be implicated. What? Do you want to silence me? Jiang Yuran raised his head. He was not afraid of Ling Fifan because he was also a first heaven immortal king. He was confident that he would not lose to Ling Fifan. I'll beat you to death, you bastard! Ling Fifan rushed out and punched Jiang Yuran. As expected, now that I've exposed your true colors, you've become angry out of humiliation. Jiang Yuran sneered and raised his hands in front of him. Quickly go and invite the lords. We must interrogate them properly. Puff while he was speaking, Ling Fifan's fist had already arrived. Now, Ling Fifan's body had been refined by Ling Han and he had a powerful physical skill. Even if he couldn't be compared with Ling Han, he was still quite extraordinary. Two of the bones in Jiang Yuran's arms were broken by this heavy punch, and his entire body was blasted into the air before crashing backwards. Peng, more than a dozen people behind him became his human cushions. The group of people all retreated a large distance before stopping. Jiang Yuran couldn't believe it. How did Ling Fifan become so powerful in just a few years? You must have colluded with a foreign enemy. Otherwise, how could you possess such combat strength? He shouted. Origin energy surged, and his arm began to slowly recover. Are you really courting death? Ling Fifan said in an awe-inspiring tone. With Ling Han standing beside him, he was completely confident and didn't bother to refute. Are you threatening me? Jiang Yuran roared with laughter. Even if you can shut my mouth, can you shut the mouths of everyone in the world? He just kept slandering Ling Fifan. Originally, Ling Fifan's return was too strange, so it was easy to turn white into black. Ling Fifan let out a soft roar and attacked Jiang Yuran once again. Bang bang bang. In just a few exchanges, Jiang Yuran had been beaten into a sorry state. How could he possibly be a match for the combination of physical techniques and rules? Ling Fifan, stop. That's right. You do need to explain a lot of things. The others couldn't sit still any longer and shouted. Ling Fifan was furious. When he was slandering me, why didn't anyone stop him? Everyone was speechless, but in their hearts, although Jiang Yuran's words were a bit excessive, they also had doubts in their hearts. Who dares to cause trouble in the camp? A dignified voice rang out. A white-robed man also appeared. He had an elegant demeanor, and his white robes were spotless. Many women immediately revealed looks of admiration. This white-robed man was called Shin Bo, and he was a 9th-level immortal king. In the lower realms, there were only a few heavenly venerables. A 9th-level immortal king could be said to be the strongest, so of course it was tempting. Greetings, Lord Shin. Jiang Yuran hurriedly cupped his hands. Ling Fifan also stopped and said, Lord Shin. Shen Bo raised his hand and looked at Ling Fifan. He couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. You're back? What about the other captives? How would I know? Ling Fifan thought to himself. Because of his relationship with Xiao, he was directly brought to the Yin clan. Naturally, he didn't know about the other captives. He shook his head. I don't know. Why don't you know? Shen Bo's tone became stern. How did you escape? Ling Fifan suppressed the anger in his heart and said, Since I'm back, I'll naturally explain everything. However, my parents are worried about my safety. Can you let me go see them first? If you colluded with the enemy, that would be the greatest crime. Who else do you want to see? Jiang Yuran interrupted. Shen Bo revealed a look of dissatisfaction. He was in the middle of a conversation, so who was qualified to interrupt? However, Jiang Yuran's words were also what he was thinking. Thus, he only glared at Jiang Yuran and didn't blame him. I, Ling Fifan, have never let down heaven and earth, nor have I let down my conscience. Ling Fifan said loudly. Aren't you afraid of being bitterly disappointed by the way you treat me? If you're innocent, what's there to worry about? Shen Bo's tone was harsh. Hurry up and say it. Fifan. At this moment, two voices rang out at almost the same time. A man and a woman flew over. Ling Jianshui and Chen Shuangshuang. Father, mother. Ling Fifan also hurriedly called out. After he was captured, he must have prepared for the worst. Now that he thought of his parents, he suddenly felt as if a lifetime had passed. The three of them were about to hug each other when Shen Bo stopped them with his hand. Both of you, it's very likely that your son has committed the crime of colluding with the enemy. Before everything is clear, he needs to be interrogated first. Ling Jianshui was furious. Their family of three had come here to fight for a world that wasn't their own, but now they were being accused of colluding with the enemy. Because of his uncontrollable anger, he also ignored Ling Han. The current Ling Han was still unkempt. Moreover, another era had passed. How could he have imagined that this person was his biological father? Shin Bo, get out of my way. He said coldly. He fought for the Shudu Plain because he was born with a strong sense of justice. He couldn't bear to see the strong bullying the weak. This was how he had come all the way. But now, they had sacrificed without asking for anything in return. In exchange, his son was regarded as a criminal who had colluded with the enemy. This was something he couldn't tolerate. Ling Jianshui, Do you still want to fight with me? Shinbo also responded coldly. He was naturally not afraid of the other party. So what if I fight? Chen Shuangshuang had a bad temper and immediately attacked Shinbo. Back then, she could be accepted as a disciple of the Heaven Saint Palace. Her talent was naturally not weak. After an era, she had also cultivated to the 9th heaven and was qualified to fight against Shinbo Boom. The two great powerhouses fought fiercely. Naturally, everyone could only flee in all directions. If they were caught in the aftermath of the battle, it would really be too unlucky. Ling Jianxue took the opportunity to go in front of Ling Fifan. Fifan, are you all right? Father, I'm fine, Ling Fifan said. Ling Jianxue then looked at Ling Han. He couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity, but he couldn't remember for a moment. Moreover, this was the Shudu Plain. How could he possibly know anyone? Chapter 2756. Ling Fifan was just about to reveal Ling Han's identity, but he suddenly felt a terrifying pressure assaulting him, causing his chest to feel stuffy, and the words that were about to come out of his mouth could not come out. Brother Lei, Brother Qin, Brother Zhao. Ling Jianxue wore a solemn expression. 3 9th firmament immortal monarchs had suddenly arrived. First, let me congratulate Brother Ling on your safe return. Lei Bing said. However, a total of over 3,000 people were captured this time. Why did only Prince Ling return unscathed? This naturally requires an explanation. Ling Jianxue was full of anger. Everyone, our family of 3 has been fighting here for millions of years. The painstaking efforts we have put in should also be seen by everyone. Don't tell me you don't even have this little bit of trust? There's no knowing what's in a man's heart. Who knows? Chen Wangyun said indifferently, but it was tantamount to giving Ling Jianxue a stab. So, Brother Ling, please cooperate with us and allow us to investigate it properly. If there are no problems, we are willing to apologize to Brother Ling and sister-in-law, Zhao Beiyue said with a smile. This was asking Ling Jianxue and his wife to surrender without a fight. Ling Jianxue was even more furious. Just because of this matter, the 3 of them were treated as criminals. Once he fell into someone else's hands, his life and death would be out of his control. As a martial artist, how could he allow such a thing to happen? Since everyone has doubts, then this place is not suitable for us to stay. Ling Jianxue sighed. Shuangshuang, let's go. Xiao, Qin Shuangshuang retreated and stood together with Ling Jianxue. Let's go. Shenbo said coldly. Are you feeling guilty? Jiang Bo, you have to touch your conscience when you speak, Ling Jianxue said in a low voice. He was already really angry. There's no need to be polite to traitors, said Lei Bing. Let's go, Ling Jianxue said. Do you think you can escape? Zhao Beiyue took the initiative to attack Ling Jianxue and his wife. As for Ling Fifan and Ling Han, they were completely ignored by him. One was only a first-layer immortal king, while the other was like a beggar. They didn't look like experts at all. Ling Jianxue met him head-on. Ping, ping, pung. The 2 of them immediately began a great battle. Ling Han did not make a move on purpose. He wanted his son's current strength. He immediately nodded. Ling Jianxue hadn't walked through so many planes in vain. He had constantly revised the rules of each plane, polishing his foundation until it was incomparably solid. He was only a step away from breaking through to the quasi-Empyrean realm. Originally, with Ling Jianxue's aptitude, he had no hope of breaking through to the Empyrean stage, but nothing was absolute in this world. He relied on his own efforts to make the impossible possible. As expected of his son, Zhao Beiyue was not Ling Jianxue's opponent. After exchanging a few moves, she fell into a disadvantageous position. Hence, Lei Bing and Jiang Bo both attacked, launching a joint attack. Chen Shuangshuang shouted and joined the battle to assist her husband. Chen Wangyun didn't want to fall behind, and it became 4 against 2. Naturally, Lei Bing and the other 3 9th firmament immortal kings weren't the only ones here. As the battle continued, more and more 9th firmament immortal kings appeared. However, none of them made a move. Many of them respected their status and were unwilling to join forces with others. Ling Han had the intention of training his son, so he also watched from the side. He wouldn't make a move unless their lives were in danger. Ling Jianshui was really extraordinary. Although he wasn't as monstrous as Ling Han, who cultivated body techniques, his foundation was too solid. He could match 4 powerhouses by himself. Chen Shuangshuang was like an assassin, mainly using guerrilla combat. The couple cooperated very well. 2 against 4, not only did they not fall into a disadvantageous position, but they even showed signs of winning. However, 3 more 9th Firmament Immortal Kings immediately attacked Ling Jianshui and his wife. In this way, Ling Jianshui and his wife immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. Brother Ling, why struggle like this? As long as you surrender, we won't hurt the 3 of you. After all, we know all your contributions, Lei Bing said. Ling Jianshui naturally didn't believe it. This was really a lie to a 3-year-old child. He finally understood the saying, "Those who are not of our race must have a different heart." In fact, it wasn't him who had a different heart. It was the people here who had never believed him. To think that he was so hot-blooded. Break out of the encirclement. He transmitted his voice to Chen Shuangshuang. If a quasi-celestial venerable or even a first step or second step celestial venerable was drawn out, then they definitely wouldn't be able to escape. Moreover, he had a secret treasure on him that could conceal his aura. Therefore, as long as they shook off their pursuers, even a celestial venerable wouldn't be able to find them. Chen Shuangshuang nodded, and the 2 suddenly erupted with a powerful move, instantly killing their way out of the encirclement. It was difficult for an immortal king to kill another immortal king, especially if they were at the same level. At this moment, they heard a cold snort. Suddenly, like a heavy hammer, it shook Ling Jianshui and his wife, causing them to tremble violently and directly fall from the sky. A celestial venerable had made a move, but it wasn't a quasi-celestial venerable. The black cloud spun and arrived above the crowd. In the cloud layer, a giant face appeared, with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks, like a god of thunder. "Greetings, Lord Absolute Thunder." Everyone knelt. Celestial Venerable Absolute Thunder, 1 step. However, there were still 4 people who didn't kneel. One was Ling Han, and the other was Ling Jianshui's family of 3. "How dare you still stand in front of this venerable?" Celestial Venerable Absolute Thunder said with dissatisfaction. He was a newly advanced Celestial Venerable, so his rules were especially strict. Especially when a 9th-level Celestial King, who was once at the same level as him, lowered his head in front of him. This made him feel especially good. Ling Jianshui didn't reply. He was very similar to Ling Han in one aspect, and that was the same lofty and unyielding character. However, it was hidden under his usual gentleness. "So what if you stand? Don't think too highly of yourself. You didn't cultivate step by step from an ordinary person," Ling Fifan suddenly said. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. A mere celestial king actually dared to reprimand a celestial venerable? Was he courting death? Celestial Venerable Absolute Thunder was already very dissatisfied. Seeing that Ling Fifan actually dared to challenge him, his killing intent immediately soared. It was true that he was a genius, but there had never been a rule that said geniuses had to be broad-minded. He attacked. Boom! A giant hand shot out from the cloud layer, flashing with blue lightning, and slapped down on Ling Fifan. Celestial venerables didn't need to have any misgivings. If they weren't pleasing to the eye, they could just kill them. Boom! As the giant hand descended, heaven and earth trembled. Ling Jianshui and his wife were in despair. They were currently suppressed by a celestial venerable's aura and were powerless to do anything. How could they save their son? However, Ling Fifan was calm and fearless. He still raised his head, refusing to lower his head. Of course, he was full of confidence. Ling Han could even defeat a second-step celestial venerable, let alone a first-step celestial venerable. Bang! The giant hand pressed down, but it was blocked by another hand, unable to completely press down. Immediately, everyone's gaze focused on Ling Han. "This is a Martial Jing Plane Celestial Venerable," everyone immediately said. This plane definitely didn't have such a celestial venerable, and he had come from the martial Jing plane with Ling Fifan. If he wasn't a celestial venerable, then what could he be? Celestial venerable Absolute Thunder was taken aback, but he immediately sneered. Even if you're a second-step celestial venerable, you can only be considered a first-step celestial venerable here. Coupled with the suppression of heaven and earth, you might not be a match for this celestial venerable. A second-step celestial venerable must have comprehended the unique power of a plane, as well as a kind of intrinsic power of the origin world. However, after changing planes, the power that a second-step celestial venerable cultivated could only enter and not exit, and it was impossible to use it again. Therefore, in other planes, a second-step celestial venerable could only be considered a first-step celestial venerable. Chapter 2758. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd was very domineering. What I've said is the heavens, the earth, and the reason. Ling Han smiled faintly. Unfortunately, you are not qualified. He looked down at Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunderbolt, who was at his feet, and said, "Let me ask you, do you regret it?" Even if Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunderbolt had misgivings, he could not admit defeat in front of everyone. He immediately raised his head and said, "This venerable does not let down the heavens and earth. What is there to regret?" "Very well." Ling Han nodded and lifted his foot. Everyone thought that he was going to release Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd. After all, this was the Shudu dimension. No matter how fierce a dragon was, it would still be afraid of the local snake. But they had not even finished this thought when they saw Ling Han's foot had already landed, directly crushing the Absolute Thunder Heavenly Venerable's head into a pulp. Damn! That was a Heavenly Venerable, but his head had been crushed. Everyone's eyes widened, their faces full of disbelief. However, a Heavenly Venerable was too strong. Even if his spiritual sea was shattered, he did not die. Instead, a soul flew out and turned into a ball of light. There was lightning surging, reflecting Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunderbolt's face. He glared fiercely at Ling Han, full of resentment. For a Heavenly Venerable, the physical body was too important, because it was the body that was tempered by extracting the power of heaven and earth. Without the support of the physical body, the soul was like a rootless duckweed, extremely weak. Of course, it was not impossible for him to regain the position of a Heavenly Venerable by seizing a new body, but that would definitely take a lot of time. "How dare you?" Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd was furious. How dare he commit murder in front of him? What kind of audacity was this? Why wouldn't I dare? Ling Han continued to attack, grabbing at Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunderbolt. Since he had said that he would kill, how could he give up halfway? Naturally, Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd could not bear it, and immediately rushed out to save Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunderbolt. Letting Ling Han commit murder once was already a great loss of face for him. How could he do it again? Boom, he slapped a palm at Ling Han, carrying an incomparably mighty momentum. Ling Han was fearless and met it with a punch. The two powerhouses clashed against each other, instantly setting off an earth-shattering shock wave. Ping, 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 everyone in all directions was sent flying, and the most unlucky one was Heavenly Venerate Absolute Thunder. Originally, he naturally wouldn't have feared the shock wave of a second-step Heavenly Venerate, but now that he was only left with his soul, he was incomparably weak, and this was fatal. He quickly drew on the power of heaven and earth to form a defense in front of him. Naturally, there was no problem with using the power of heaven and earth. Bam, he was too close, and the shockwave directly shattered his defenses. As the remaining power surged, his soul was also torn apart, and it was indescribably uncomfortable. If not for the fact that he no longer had a physical body, he would have definitely vomited blood. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd turned pale with fright. He retreated hundreds of miles and stared at Ling Han in horror. This was because he realized that Ling Han did not call upon the power of heaven and earth at all. There were three possibilities. First, he was a first-step Heavenly Venerate from a different plane, so it was naturally impossible for him to extract the unique power of this plane. Second, The other party had deliberately used only the power of his physical body. The third possibility was completely zero, and that was that the other party was only a quasi-heavenly venerate, so it was naturally impossible for him to call upon the power of heaven and earth. But no matter what, the other party's power should be incomparably weaker than his, so how was it possible for him to be evenly matched with a single blow, and even slightly stronger? How could anyone understand this? "Who are you?" he asked. If there was such a freak in the Marshall Jing plane, would there have been a need to invade step by step? They could have just marched straight in. Clang. At this moment, the world reacted, and it slashed at Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd, but Ling Han acted as if nothing had happened. Quasi-Heavenly Venerate. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd's mouth was half open, as if he had seen a ghost. It was not that he had not considered this possibility, but it was close to zero in his mind. Heh, wasn't this a joke? A quasi-heavenly venerate could match a second-step heavenly venerate? Was there anything more ridiculous than this in the world? But the world had targeted him and did not care about Ling Han. Wasn't this the best proof? Below, everyone was also in an uproar. Who could believe this? Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder was even more incredulous. If his physical body was destroyed by a quasi-heavenly venerate, wouldn't that become the greatest joke in history? Ling Han did not answer. Xiao, his figure moved, and he continued to attack Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder. He wanted to establish his might. Stop! Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd hurriedly flew over. Whether for the sake of his own face or for the sake of his own plane, he naturally could not allow Ling Han to kill a Heavenly Venerable. Ling Han channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, directly ignoring Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd, and continued to attack Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd blocked in every way possible, but his strength was not superior to Ling Han's in the first place, and moreover, if he continued to defend, he would definitely lose. Even if he blocked 1,000 or 10,000 strikes from Ling Han, as long as one strike landed, Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder would definitely die. This caused Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd to feel extremely aggrieved. He had never been so tired, and it made him feel as if he had power, but he could not use it. Even if he continued to rescue him, Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder was still heavily injured, and a large part of his soul had been torn off, continuously weakening. If this continued, it would not be long before Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder died. No way! Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd's eyes turned, and he stared at Ling Jianshui and the others. Since you can attack the weak, then I can naturally as well, and everyone will have to hold back for fear of harming the weak. With a thought, he immediately pounced towards Ling Jianshui and the others. Ling Han humphed. Even you want to die? He turned around and chased after Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd, but with a flick of his right hand, Xiao, a cold light surged out and shot towards Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder's soul. Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder was just breathing a sigh of relief and did not expect that Ling Han would actually give him a blow, causing him to hurriedly draw the power of heaven and earth to protect himself. This time, there was no Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd to help him resolve it, so he had to do it himself. The shield formed by the power of heaven and earth was completely useless in front of this cold light, and a sword pierced through. Heavenly Venerable Treasure! Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder shouted in his mind. He was a newly advanced Heavenly Venerable, and had not yet refined his own Heavenly Venerable Treasure. Otherwise, he would have used it long ago. Before he finished his thought, the divine demon sword had already pierced through. The soul was incredibly fragile in the first place, so how could it possibly block the sharpness of a Heavenly Venerable Treasure? Immediately it was pierced through. Under the destructive power of a Heavenly Venerable Treasure, Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder's soul was immediately annihilated. He sent out a wave of divine sense, and instantly spread throughout this plane. Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder, dead. There was no heaven and earth mourning, no rain of blood falling. Heavenly Venerables were not controlled by heaven and earth, and were hated and envied by heaven and earth. Naturally, there were no strange phenomena. Xiao, Ling Han had already closed in, and shot out a punch, channeling the 5-element lightning technique, which blasted towards Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord's back. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord had to intervene. If he allowed Ling Han to land a blow with his Heavenly Venerable Treasure technique, then his physical body might immediately shatter like Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder. He turned around and delivered a palm strike, parrying this punch from Ling Han. Yet Ling Han twisted his feet and immediately appeared in front of Ling Jianshui and Helian Xuanxue. With a wave of his hand, he had already taken all 4 of them into the celestial visitor residence. Then he turned around and faced Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord. Chapter 2759. Everyone felt as if their souls had been seized, unable to speak. Killing Heavenly Lord Absolute Thunderbolt with a single sword strike, and then withdrawing to block Heavenly Lord Spirit Gord, saving Ling Jianshui and the others. How powerful was this person? Nice to meet you. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord glared at Ling Han. He was truly enraged. Ling Han smiled faintly. With a wave of his hand, the divine demon sword automatically flew back to him. He said, "I'm actually a very easygoing person. As long as you don't cross my bottom line, I won't kill anyone." If someone wanted to kill him, he might just smile indifferently and say, "Come on, I'll destroy you with a single punch. It's beneath me to deal with you in advance." However, if someone wanted to touch his family and friends, he would take the initiative to attack and wipe out this potential enemy with the force of a thunderbolt. For example, Empyrean Absolute Thunderbolt or someone like Jiang Bo. Ling Han's gaze swept across these people. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He wanted to kill all of them. "You still want to commit murder?" Heavenly Venerate Spirit Gord's voice was thick with rage. "If I want to kill someone, you can stop me," Ling Han said with a smile. Heavenly Venerate Spirit Gord was speechless. Absolute Thunder was a first step Heavenly Venerate, but he was still slaughtered by Ling Han. How was he supposed to protect the rest of them if they couldn't even put up a fight against Ling Han? "You will die," he said, enunciating each word clearly. When he said the word, "die," the jade gourd tied to his hair suddenly fell to the ground. Instantly, boundless light blossomed, and an aura that transcended space and time circulated about, suffocating everyone present. He also took out an Empyrean treasure artifact. He was going to go all out this time. The jade gourd rose into the sky and continued to expand. Furthermore, it seemed as though there was no end to it as it blotted out the sky. Ling Han stood proudly with the divine demon sword in his hand. He was completely fearless. "Suppress." Celestial Spirit Gord pointed at Ling Han. "Bzz." Boundless light erupted from the jade gourd, transforming into an ocean that surged toward Ling Han. "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Ling Han sneered and charged at Spirit Gord with his sword. As the divine demon sword slashed out, he sliced through the rays of light and continued onward. "No matter how much of a monster you are, you're still just a quasi-Empyrean." Empyrean Spirit Gord sneered. He stretched out his hands and gathered the power of heaven and earth to form a spear that stabbed at Ling Han. Clang, 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 clang. Ling Han slashed out with his sword, shattering the spear into countless pieces. He advanced aggressively, and his speed was not slow at all. His battle prowess wasn't any weaker than his opponent's, so how could he be obstructed? However, when he neared, the Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord activated his Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord. A burst of black light surged out of the gourd and transformed into a waterfall that blocked Ling Han's path. Boom, 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 the two powerhouses had even taken out their Heavenly Venerate life treasures. Naturally, they were going all out. They continued to bombard each other, and then Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord's expression became more and more ugly, because he found that he was no match for Ling Han. The gap between them wasn't huge, but he was still no match for them. He was shocked. Was this really a quasi-Empyrean? This was a low-level plane, so a second-step Heavenly Venerate couldn't fight with his full strength for a long time. Otherwise, he would be targeted by heaven and earth. Heavenly tribulation was a small matter, but the key was that heaven and earth would prevent a Heavenly Venerate from extracting the power of heaven and earth. Without extracting the power of heaven and earth, A second-step heavenly venerate could only be considered a quasi-empyrean. A second-step quasi-empyrean. Therefore, a heavenly venerate would definitely become weaker the longer they fought. Of course, this could be resolved in a high-level plane. The tolerance of heaven and earth was great. One was getting weaker the more they fought, while the other could remain the same. Was there any need to say the result? Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord thought that if he wanted to defeat Ling Han, he could only crush him with overwhelming strength. Otherwise, he would only suffer more and more losses until he was defeated. But the problem was that he was already the strongest person in this plane. If he wanted to suppress Ling Han, only a third-step heavenly venerate could do it. Could a low-level plane cultivate a third-step heavenly venerate? Then, there was another way to contend with Ling Han, and that was to rely on numbers. He could stop and rest before heaven and earth targeted him. Now that he was alone, this was empty talk. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord hurriedly sent out a distress signal. He really couldn't stop Ling Han alone. For the time being, he could still hold on. Ling Han intercepted his consciousness fluctuations, but he didn't care. He was alone, and he could fight and leave whenever he wanted. Moreover, his strength came entirely from himself, so he didn't have to worry about the other heavenly venerates. He had also deliberately asked for this battle. Otherwise, how could he convince others with words alone? The reason why Taiyun and the others had listened to Ling Han before was that his combat strength was strong enough. Otherwise, it would be a joke for a quasi-heavenly venerate to talk to a second-step heavenly venerate as an equal. Ling Han shook off Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord. His strength was not enough to kill the other party in a short time, so he went to kill Jiang Bo and the others. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord tried to stop him, but there was no way. The immortal kings who had attacked Ling Jianshui were slaughtered one by one. Ling Han went on a killing spree. When he was almost done, another heavenly venerate finally arrived. There were second-step and first-step heavenly venerates, as well as a few quasi-heavenly venerates. There were a total of 9 people. Seeing that Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord was fighting fiercely with Ling Han, 2 second-step heavenly venerates immediately roared and joined the battle. The powerhouses of the martial Jing dimension were killed without mercy. However, as soon as they fought, they were immediately shocked. This was because Ling Han's strength was too strong, and he didn't look like a second-step heavenly venerate from a different dimension at all. This monster is only a quasi-heavenly venerate, but his combat strength is too extraordinary, Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord explained. What? The other 2 second-step heavenly venerates couldn't accept that a quasi-heavenly venerate could be so awesome. However, they thought about the details. They were all targeted by the world, but Ling Han wasn't. Moreover, Ling Han didn't use the power of the world. It seemed even more impossible that he didn't use it because he despised them. This was because he was a quasi-heavenly venerate. How can a quasi-heavenly venerate be so strong? While they were shocked, endless greed rose in their hearts. If they could take down Ling Han and force out the secrets of his strength, wouldn't they become even more powerful? Take him down. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord said. Now that 3 heavenly venerates were attacking Ling Han together, victory was naturally in their grasp. All right. The other 2 heavenly venerates nodded. Although Ling Han was unbelievably strong, he hadn't exceeded their limits yet. The battle between the 4 was incomparably intense. With the 3 heavenly venerates working together, they could solve the problem of exhaustion. As long as they took a breather at the side of the battle, they could avoid the problem of being targeted by the world and immediately be full of energy. Ling Han frowned slightly. How long would it take to fight like this? With a thought, he turned and left. Don't run. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gord and the other 2 hurriedly chased after him. Ling Han led them to the depths of the 2-realm battlefield. This place didn't belong to the martial Jing dimension, nor did it belong to the Shudu dimension. Instead, it could be thought of as an independent heaven and earth. If it was by chance, it would be like the collision between the celestial realm and the foreign realm, and really form a small world with a dimension core. After arriving here, Ling Han stopped running. Instead, he turned and faced them. Spirit Gord and the other 2 heavenly venerates didn't dare to be careless. This wasn't the Shudu dimension. With the power of heaven and earth suppressing cultivators from the foreign realm, elites from the martial Jing dimension could appear at any time. If they were surrounded, they could die here. Ling Han roared, slashing his divine demon sword wildly. They fought fiercely again, but Spirit Gourd and the other two heavenly venerates soon encountered a problem. They couldn't draw the power of heaven and earth here. Chapter 2760. The reason why an Empyrean was so powerful was because they could extract the power of heaven and earth for their own use. But there was no way to extract the power of heaven and earth here, so an Empyrean was not much stronger than a quasi-Empyrean. Neither of us can absorb the energy of heaven and earth, so let's see who's stronger, laughed Ling Han. He had cultivated his own heaven and earth core, which could also be considered his plane core. His power was endless, so why should he be afraid of a protracted battle? The heavenly venerable Spirit Gourd and the others knew that battling here was disadvantageous to them. However, their eyes were filled with greed for Ling Han's powerful secret, so they were unwilling to retreat no matter what. Thus, they continued to attack Ling Han. But as their strength continued to drop, the three of them became irritated. If this went on, not only would they not be able to deal with Ling Han, they might even be suppressed by Ling Han instead. They were hoping for a miracle to happen, for Ling Han's power to suddenly plummet. They did not believe that someone could be so monstrous and have endless power. However, the miracle didn't happen, but their strength was dropping. Retreat. The three Empyreans had no choice but to retreat, or their combat strength would drop by 2 steps. At that time, how could they possibly be a match for Ling Han? You want to leave now? Not so easy. Ling Han snorted coldly as he chased after heavenly venerate Spirit Gourd. Impudent. The three celestials attacked together, charging towards Ling Han. This time, Ling Han also threw caution to the wind. He channeled the indestructible heaven scroll and completely ignored the other two heavenly venerables. He focused his attacks on the heavenly venerable Spirit Gourd. Otherwise, the latter would have the opportunity to escape back to the Shudu plane. Bang bang bang, the battle prowess of a second-step heavenly venerate was truly berserk. Under the frenzied bombardment, Ling Han only felt his chest boiling fiercely. It was extremely uncomfortable. However, he still ignored him and continued to bombard Empyrean's Spirit Gourd. He was determined to keep this person here. If he wanted Shudu plane to listen to him, then he had to establish his might first and let everyone here calm down. The second-step heavenly venerate was a good choice, not to mention that heavenly venerate Spirit Gourd wanted to attack Ling Jianshui and the others. If it had been earlier, heavenly venerable Spirit Gourd would still have been in his strongest state, and it would have been a piece of cake for him to escape. However, due to their greed, the three of them were only willing to retreat after their strength had dropped. Would he still be able to escape after being bombarded by Ling Han with all his might? He would only get weaker and weaker. How could he be a match for Ling Han? The other two second-step heavenly venerables were also going crazy. The three heavenly venerables had attacked together, yet Ling Han still managed to capture or kill one of them. How could they still have the face to see others in the future? They did not stop attacking, determined to rescue heavenly venerable Spirit Gourd. Puff Ling Han was coughing up blood, and so was heavenly venerate Spirit Gourd. He was in bad shape as well. The current situation was very delicate. If Celestial Lord Spirit Gourd could hold on for a little longer, he might be able to hold on until Ling Han was seriously injured. Then, he would naturally be able to resolve his own crisis. However, if Ling Han could hold on longer than him, he would be the one to fall. Of course, who could become a heavenly venerable without great perseverance? Whether it was Ling Han or heavenly venerable Spirit Gourd, both of them were incomparably tenacious. No matter how dire the situation was, they would not lose their fighting spirit. In this aspect, heavenly venerable Spirit Gourd did not lose to Ling Han at all. However, the problem was that heavenly venerable Spirit Gourd's battle prowess was constantly declining, while Ling Han's battle prowess was not. This slowly revealed Ling Han's advantage. Sword after sword slashed at heavenly venerable Spirit Gourd's body, causing him to quickly collapse. You dare to attack the people around me? That Ling Han said coldly. With a slash of his sword, Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd's head was instantly pierced. No! The other two second-step Heavenly Venerables cried out in horror. They were already at a disadvantage in the planar war. Now that one of their second-step Heavenly Venerables had been killed, the situation naturally became even worse. Ling Han completely ignored them. He stored Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd's corpse into his spatial divine artifact and turned to leave. The other two Heavenly Venerables only chased after him for a few steps before stopping. Although Ling Han was seriously injured, he still had the strength to fight. However, if they chased him into the martial Jing dimension, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. They sighed and shook their heads. With the death of a second-step Heavenly Venerable, the war situation had become even more dire. Ling Han did not immediately return to the martial Jing dimension. Instead, he stayed here to recuperate. Otherwise, there was no guarantee that Yang Jihe and the others would not turn hostile and attack him. It was better to be careful. He had suffered serious injuries. After all, he had forcefully withstood the attacks of two Heavenly Venerables to kill Heavenly Venerable Spirit Gourd. I'm a quasi-Heavenly Venerable after all. This is my limit. Ling Han thought to himself. However, to be able to kill one of the three second-step Heavenly Venerables while being besieged was absolutely unprecedented. I've basically walked this path, Yi Futian said. Ling Han was very satisfied with himself. Next, as long as he returned to the fiery frost dimension and mastered the unique power there, he would strive to become a Heavenly Venerable. 7 years later, he finally fully recovered from his injuries and returned to the martial Jing dimension. Daoist Ling, did your trip go smoothly? Antaiyan personally came out to greet him. Ling Han smiled and sent everyone in the celestial visitor in out. He said, "It was all right. I encountered a little trouble, but it's been resolved." What trouble?" Antaiyan asked. Ling Han shook his hand, and two corpses appeared on the ground. A terrifying aura surged, and the Tuan brothers who were standing behind Antaiyan immediately turned pale and could not help but tremble. Fortunately, Antaiyan had already released his own aura to protect his two sons. And Pingtian and Pinghai were both shocked. What level of powerhouses were these two corpses? How could they have such a great aura even though they were dead? Antaiyan's gaze swept across. He saw Heavenly Venerable Absolute Thunder first and was slightly surprised. He knew that this was a newly ascended Heavenly Venerable, but when he saw Heavenly Venerable Lingord, his eyeballs popped out. This was his old rival. The two of them had fought countless times, and their strengths were about the same. However, if he entered the Shudu dimension, he would definitely be slaughtered by the other party, and vice versa. However, Ling Han entered the Shudu dimension, and not only did he not die, but he also forcefully killed two Heavenly Venerables. How terrifying was that? Brother Ling, I'm really convinced. He sighed. He had always called Ling Han Daoist Ling, and addressed himself as the Venerable. Although he acknowledged Ling Han's strength, he still had the pride of a second-step Heavenly Venerable. But now that Heavenly Venerable Lingord, whose strength was comparable to his, had been killed by Ling Han, what else did he have to be proud of? Ling Han smiled. Both parents are here. It's about time to prepare for the wedding, right? Okay, Antaiyan agreed without hesitation. The marriage of two Heavenly Venerables was naturally a major event. After hearing the news, not only did the immortal kings come to the banquet, but even the Heavenly Venerables were no exception. Originally, the second-step Heavenly Venerables did not want to come in person because of their status. However, after hearing about Ling Han's achievements and how he even killed Heavenly Venerable Lingord, none of them could sit still and came in person. As the wedding proceeded, the newlyweds were naturally teased in various ways. Ling Han, Antaiyan Yang Jihe, the four knights Heavenly Venerable, and the others discussed behind closed doors. After considering for so long, they naturally wanted to hear their answers. If Ling Han did not kill Heavenly Venerable Lingord, then they would only shake their heads. How would they be willing to give up on the event that they had been planning for dozens of eras? But now, they all nodded and agreed. that you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.